Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everyone, and oh my God, I'm gigantic. Well, I mean, I am gigantic, but then... there we go. Sorry about that. Whoop. Oh no, you're seeing the sausage being made. How's everybody doing? Welcome. There we go. Sorry about that. I changed the lens on my camera, so it's almost imperceptibly different, but it is a better lens. But we'll go from there. Also, I did take out my fill light over here, so that might be a little dark, and we'll figure out from there. Welcome. Yeah, live to a 15x zoom. You can count all the pores in my face. What's up, everybody? Again, sorry, I apologize. I'm just being silly. I'm being a goof. And yeah. Welcome. There we go. Hello, and welcome. Actually, now that I realize it, I just messed that up again. But it's for a reason you can't know. But I got to reset this transformation, sorry. There we go. I know. The stuff that you see behind the screens, it's crazy. There we go. Finally, perfect. All right. Yep. Time to get a completely new stream layout. What's up? Yeah. Very, very cool here. Zoom in on the white brow. It's true. I do have. We're getting all over the place today here, aren't we? Yeah. I have a white. I have white eyelashes for part of my eye, and there's also a patch of depigmented skin that kind of extends down into the eyelash. So this little patch here is basically white, and my eyelashes are white. And it is a birth. Basically, it's vitiligo, but sometimes you see people have it like with a shock through their hair, but I did not. I just got it on my eyelash. All right. Anyways. Come on. What is going on here? What? Sorry, guys. This is being a pain in the butt. All right. We're done. I promise. Hey, Oscars, welcome. Yeah, so I threw the stream a little earlier than we normally do a Sunday stream, specifically because this stream topic was actually voted on by the European stream, which was a tip goal for Derek to just kind of talk about the things that he maybe wanted to change in Daggerheart. Which isn't to say that the game has any problems. In fact, I actually think the game has surprisingly very robust mechanics behind it. It's one of the reasons I like the game. But there's things that I would change. Now, some of these things are not because there's a problem with the game at all. And in fact, most of them aren't even really about making the game better. They are more nebulous than that. They are strange little structural issues, little nomenclature differences, things of that nature. I am not a big fan of just bolting on, new systems into a game that I like. Taking one system from a game I like and just bolting it onto another game. It's not the way I really tend to. When I make changes, I don't tend to do that. I tend to either create entirely new systems that hopefully integrate well with that, the current system, or that, take into account the multitude of options that are available for that game. Anyways, well, you're working on your own campaign frame for this. Help me a lot. Probably not Oscars, because as I said in the title, let's go fuck up a completely viable game. The reason I say that is because, number one, I am not a game designer. Number two, I don't have hundreds of hours of experience with this game. So a lot of these changes are not changes that I would necessarily recommend for anyone. In fact, I should even highlight something here. I don't know what these changes are. This stream is a bonus stream. We're doing it on Sunday. And it's more of like when I read through the book. Now, to be clear, I was going to take the last couple hours Sunday, and I was going to like put together a list. However, there were some things happening over in the northern reaches that required my immediate attention, and so I ended up dealing with that and making a video for that real quick. So I haven't actually had any time to even put together like my list of things that I was like, oh, this is what I would change. Some of this is just like when I read the book, some abilities jump off the page at me. Some things, some mechanics jump off the page at me, and others don't. And for me, it's like if it was up to me, I would change this. Now, one of the truest rules that we get is some people are very good at figuring out what is something they don't like, but they're very bad at knowing what it is that they would rather be, right? What is it? The same level of consciousness is not capable of the level of consciousness that finds problems is not the same level of consciousness that can solve them. So that's kind of where I'm at. We have two goals today, which are completely arbitrary. Which are you more interested in? Chronicles of Hope or Visions of Fear? And if you're like, what the hell is those? So basically, what it comes down to is when we were talking originally, when Daggerheart came out just a few months ago, we were like, oh, that'd be really cool to get knowledgeable about this game and maybe create some kind of zine or some sort of content for it. And we were going to kind of divide it into two parts, right? Hope and fear. Hope being player-facing stuff, fear being GM-facing stuff. And so I'm curious, as you all have started to explore Daggerheart, as you started to play Daggerheart, run Daggerheart, what are the elements of the game that you find that you would be most interested in, right? Which is, are you looking for more player-facing, and that could be an expansion of existing components, right? More classes, more domains, more domain cards, right? Or whole new player-facing systems. Same thing on the GM side, right? Are you looking for more adversaries, more environments, more campaign frames, or more items? I guess items kind of occupy an in-between ground. They're probably more player-facing, honestly. Or are you looking for more? Are you looking for newer GM systems and GM things that you can play around with from that perspective? And so I think it's a really interesting choice. Obviously, it's just a way for you guys to throw some, to throw some support for the channel, but you put it out there. I know it's not like a tip goal in a traditional sense. It's more of just like, hey, this is a bonus stream off of a tip goal. So if people want to donate to me and help support this channel and keep the Dagger hype going, I'm all for it. But I don't want to. But that being said, I really do think that's something I really want to do. Work with my community and try to be a kind of producer of some form of Daggerheart content. I think the game really it tickles my brain in the right ways, which is nice. So my guess is a lot Oscars. Hopefully not like so much that it'll completely destroy the game. What is up, everyone? Hey, what's going on, Richard? Good to see you. Good to see you. Darius, yes, I was in on that 16x zoom. So when I change the lens, it resets my camera's profile, and that means it resets back to its native setting, which is 4K. So actually, it was 4x zoom, not 16x zoom. But fantastic! I'm glad you finally caught a live. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you can hang out with us. Yeah. So, but what's that? How was our game on Friday? Well, it was Pathfinder 2. Let's just say that, for all the good and bad that entails. Yeah, it's fine. It's more like sometimes I feel like we're playing very different games because of the wide variety between our characters. What was really interesting is that Tim forgot his character sheet. He brought over his 5th edition character, and so Smith made him play with his 5th edition character in PF2, which I thought was really funny. My teeth are nice and white. Well, thank you. No, very professional show for sure. So that's the goal. It's not really a goal, Chris. It's more of just like telling me what you're interested in. Derek, you are interrupting me watching Derek try to give an NR announcement. Inconsiderate to pass Derek. That's true. Yes, as Sarek was mentioning, I made a video quickly to sort of try to soothe some ruffled feathers and some hot tempers in the northern reaches. You would think, being a cold, frigid wasteland, it would be a place of not of hot tempers, but it does. Every season, we seem to always run into something. And so Sarek is watching a video that I just made that I posted, not for public, it's just for my patrons, for my Northern Reaches players, and he's also watching me now. What's up, Sims 3? Good to see you. Good to see you. Ooh, Trey. I ran my first Daggerheart game last night. It went great, and we're going to switch from Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Wow, what a big change up. Wow. Howdy, K-Tube. Mr. Keiko, tonight I felt like rewatching Black Hawk Down. Okay. That's the one with the helicopter. Fantastic. It's not fully player-facing. I mean, it's fairly player-facing, right? Hey, Lord Kyler. Sorry, I'm making my way through the chat. We did have a super chat. Look at that, $5. Lord Kyler, thank you. Hope. After your last stream, I found backstory cards are actually available for purchase on Foundry as an add-on module. Not sure if you've seen that. Lord Kyler, I am aware of that. That is due to the fact that basically they are up on Foundry and they're being hosted by someone, and you can still buy them on Foundry. I have all of those cards on Foundry as well. So I have them in PDF, Foundry, and that is true. That is the one place, Lord Kyler, that you can actually still buy them, and I'm mad at myself for not reminding people of that. So thank you, Lord Kyler. That's actually a really good point out. But yes, it is available there. I don't know if it's going to be up there forever. I mean, they eventually may find a way to take it down. But I think when you put something up at the Bazaar, you have to like sign a license agreement with them or something, and I think that's why they couldn't, quote unquote, take it down. So there you go. As far as I can tell, they are officially licensed from Galileo Games to the Immaterial Plane, and the Immaterial Plane is still able to sell them, even though Galileo Games has sort of go defunct. That's exactly right. Jess is here, ready to judge Derek on the changes he'd make to this still very new game. Oh, let me be clear. Let me be extremely clear here. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is almost 100% vibes based. It is all gas, no brakes. It is just me, just fucking everything up. Hold on 1 second. A dog is barking. I'll be right back. Okay, you know what's annoying? I'm sorry. They're very hardworking people, but you know what's annoying? If you're a delivery person and you knock on the door because you need me to sign something, cool. And I get it. They're knocking, I guess, to tell me that the package is here. But it's like, wouldn't you think it would alert on my phone or something? So when you knock on the door, I think there's someone there. My dogs go crazy. Just put the package down. Just put the package down and leave. That's all. Anyways, I'm just complaining. There was a package delivered. All right, fair enough, Oscars. That's pretty good here. That is pretty reasonable. Calliope says, the Chronicles of Hope for me. I'm a forever GM, and I love to see what players get to do. Fantastic. DM Biologist, welcome. Glad to see you here live. Do you usually hack a lot of the systems you play, or you think Daggerheart just think Daggerheart needs? Oh, Henrique, I don't think Daggerheart needs any hacking at all. And in fact, I'm even willing to bet that most of the changes that people make to their games are bad changes, myself included. And not because we're an idiot like I am, but because there's no way that we're going to put in the time and the effort to properly play test this with a wide variety of people. And, so much, I'm sure, of what you buy out there on the internet lands from so-called house rulers and hackers is fundamentally flawed. But we get away with it on an individual basis because we're doing it for a very limited number of people who aren't paying money for our product. They're just showing up and having fun, and your player group and stuff like that. So to that end, do I usually hack my game systems? Yes, but not in the way that I think a lot of people hack their games. A lot of people hack games by like bolting. I guess it's the difference between like hacking and bolting. I mean, it's kind of a subtle difference here, but I tend to not like to change. Again, there's exceptions. I'll be inspired by a system, but I don't like to just cut out systems whole cloth from one game and stick them onto another one. So I adapt. I change more than anything. Well, fantastic. That's a good stream too. The monsters are really sweet in Draw Steel. Philip Manley says, partly due to you mentioning them, I recently got into Earthsea. Love the first book. Which RPG system do you think resembles the world of Earthsea the most? Probably like none of them. Ars Magica, probably, because it's kind of this idea of like that all magic has a cost, that magic is a balance, that type of thing. Do you think Daggerheart, I assume that's supposed to be Daggerheart, is missing a con stat rather than having 2 dex-based stats? Nope. In fact, I like having 2 dex-based stats and eliminating the con stat. Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Maddie Dubs. Don't tell me how to do my job, Derek. Well, I'm sorry. Most changes people make to their games are bad for the game, but better for the group. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Let's see here. I joined just in time to see Ars Magica mentioned, so this will be a good one. Yeah. I fell asleep at my computer, and I woke up to Derek's voice. I'm in heaven. He's gonna regret that. Steven, by the end of this year, Steven and I will have spent a lot of time together. Between all these cons. Okay, so where to begin? I mean, this is your bonus stream that the Europeans helped pay for. So thank you, Europeans. And we can kind of talk about a variety of things. Couple of things though. This is a Friday night. I was going to do this stream after I got back from playing D&D. And then I was going to do this stream yesterday. But I didn't because Bob and I were working on the studio. Why was Derek so hype? Because Derek finally got... That's right. He finally got a Daggerheart Collector's Edition, Limited Edition. It's so pretty. It's so beautiful. Including... of course, the thing that I really wanted, which was the beautiful, beautiful alternate art cover. So, very, very, very cool, very gorgeous. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Like, it's a beautiful book, of course. But there's nothing wrong with the original book. But this alternate cover is so good. I love it. It's fantastic. And of course, the screen. It's beautiful, gorgeous, gold leaf embossed screen. So pretty. I don't usually like alternate covers. In fact, I almost always go for the main. I actually go out of my way to avoid alternate arts. I imagine I try to just get whatever. But that game, I wanted it. I think it looked better. I thought it looked better. I can't believe they didn't hire the GM. Now, I cannot disclose whether or not I may have also purchased some collector's editions, which I may be giving away. Possibly. That won't be today. But we are going to do a giveaway today. And it has nothing to do with the super chat goals. It has nothing to do with the tip goals. Although I will say I did close it. If you do want to support us and you don't want to give us any money, you can support us for free over on twitch.tv/Knights of Last Call. That is our Twitch Prime or Twitch, and you can support us with your Prime subscription. It doesn't cost you any money, but it gives us a couple bucks. You can do that every month. I'd be awesome if you did that. No, what we are going to be giving away today is one of our KOLC made especially for us. We are going to be giving away a set of our Hope and Fear dice. These are enlarged D12s, similar to the ones that Critical Role just released, but these are in the Hope and Fear color. I worked with Mad Dragon to formulate the colors so that it looked Hope and Fearish. It looked a little Knights of Last Callish. Our colors are orange and sort of magenta, or sort of that deep purple. And the main thing was having this really big, really oversized, super deep, clear font, so that it was really, really visible. You can see, compared to even a normal size D12, the amount of real estate that the number takes up on the side is very, very, very high proportion. And so, again, I think that is very, very cool. So, because the reason we created these, that I worked with, and by the way, shout out to Mad Dragon, shout out to Aaron and his wife, is because we wanted to be able to show these on camera during our live play, our actual play. So the folks over at Mad Dragon put together a bunch of sets for us. They even for ours, they even kind of buffed. They didn't shine them up as much. They're kind of matte finish, so that there won't be glare off of our lighting. But like I was saying, they sent us a couple of extra sets. So at some point today, we'll be doing a giveaway for one of these cool sets of dice from Mad Dragon. And if you are interested, if you don't win, but you're interested in purchasing them anyways, you can. I'll put a link in the. I'm looking for their link. You can put a link in there. You can buy them from their site, from their website, and that'd be sweet. There we go. I'll put it in chat if I can find it. There we go. There you go. Pretty cool. Pretty cool, I think. I would say. I'm biased, of course, but, who am I to say I'm not biased? There we go. You can buy those over at Mad Dragon. Knights of Last Call, D12 Hope and Fear die. They're also, I don't know if they're up yet, but they're also doing class-specific ones as well. Like they're going to do a set of wizard dice. They're going to do a set of other things. So they're pretty cool. And I think they look really great, and they do a great job. And, of course, you're supporting a small independent creator, which is fantastic and awesome. So shout out to them. Thanks to them. And, again, we'll be giving away a pair at some point. Okay. Let's see. Where do we want to go with this? You know what? We'll just start. We'll start crazy here. Let me turn off my dark mode. Okay. So someone gave me the clue. They said, okay, if you use light mode, okay, if you use light mode for your Excalidraw, you'll get vibrant colors. But then you can change the canvas color to like a dark color, and then you can sort of work with that. That's what I think. Can we get a high-level view of what tweaks you would want to do? Oh, Thaddeus. Honestly, Thaddeus, like I said, I didn't really get a chance. There's so many little things that I've noticed as I've gone through the game. Like, we could really just, like, start scrolling through the book, and I would probably be like, oh, I want to change that. Oh, I want to change that. I want to change that. So this is, you know, I was going to do this before the stream, but again, I got caught up in dealing with some Northern Reaches stuff. So I didn't get a really chance for this. But at a high level, there's just a lot of little minor tweaks that I would make to some of the rules and some of the names. Some of them, again, it's not because the game, again, this is a vibe thing. Okay, I'll start with the biggest one. I think the game should have 12 levels. So that's like obviously the biggest one. I was right about the yes, you were right about it being pastel because of dark mode force. You were completely correct. So one of them is 12 levels. In terms of like naming nomenclatures, I think that we should refer to the game. We should refer to the damage thing as wounds instead of calling them hit points. You gain wounds, right? You know, if your character might have 9 hit points. But instead of saying mark a hit point, I would say mark a wound, or take a wound, or gain a wound, or gain 2 wounds, or gain 3 wounds, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, a minor injury is 1 wound. A severe injury is 2 wounds, right? A major injury is 3 wounds. So that's like a naming thing. And then in terms of like classes, you know, there's a lot of changes, honestly, that randomly stick out to me, that we can sort of go through. Like, for example, just completely randomly, like as a little minor thing, I don't like the Wizard's Hope feature. I don't think it's particularly interesting. I don't think it really makes sense for the Wizard, and I'm just not a huge fan of it. But what I do like is that well, we'll get to that in a second. So I don't like the Wizard's Hope feature. By the way, for people who don't know what the Wizard's Hope feature is, it is called Not This Time, and it's spend 3 hope to force an adversary within far range to re-roll an attack or damage roll. So I think that's a fine ability, okay? But I don't think it's particularly interesting, and I don't really think it's like flavored to what the Wizard is. So that's the issue. That's one issue. But there is something that I like about the Wizard Hope feature, which is that I like that it's reactionary. And so one change that I think I would make is that I would give, and again, some of this involves potentially massively restructuring, which is that I think that all the classes should have a reactionary hope ability. Now, some of them can also have they can have another hope ability that's like proactive. But I really think games are benefited when everybody has a reaction. And the problem that I have with most reactions in most games, I mean, I think overall reactions are great and we should use them. The problem I have with reactions in most games is, let me start with this. Why do I like reactions so much? I like reactions so much because it makes you pay attention and it rewards you for being engaged at all times. Okay. And I was a little bit hesitant on this, but we learned from the quick start guide. What was it called? The homebrew guide, that hope costs don't have to be 3. Right? Obviously hope costs could be whatever we want them to be, right? They could be 0, they could be 6. I guess 0 isn't a cost. You know that intrinsically. Of course they can be. But just because something can be different doesn't mean that the game is mentally prepared to accept that they should be different. They obviously went with 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 because it makes it very clear across the board and it's easy. But I wasn't sure. Just because you can change something doesn't mean that you should. But the homebrew guide for Daggerheart, which released when we were in Gen Con, or there shortly thereafter, basically confirmed that hope doesn't really need to, or hope features don't necessarily need to be 3. That is something that is a lever for design place. Now we're kind of bouncing all over the place here, and I apologize for this, but that's because people in chat are talking. So, anyways, I like that the Wizard gives the reroll ability because I like being able to pay attention. So I like reactions because they reward you for being engaged. They also are really good if they can retroactively or after the fact apply some sort of benefit because it's really a great way to encourage players to feel very engaged and rewarded and have a lot of agency, that you can step in and sort of, change it up. But the problem I have with some reactions, like Attack of Opportunity is a great example of it. Attack of Opportunity, the problem with it is it's free. And a lot of times with reactions, it's sort of like use it or lose it. In fact, we've talked before in Pathfinder 2nd Edition how it's really not a 3-action economy, it's a 4-action economy. You get 3 actions and a reaction. So your best build is to try to use up all 4 of those per round. And so I would really try to structure it in a way that that reactions occur, but if they occur too often or they're too automatic, then it doesn't have the same, I don't know, it can become tiresome. It can become problematic. It becomes just like everybody's interrupting everybody. I don't want everyone interrupting everyone all the time. I want it to be, kind of a cool big thing where you're able to sort of step in and say, no, I have this cool niche ability. I can use my reaction, or, I can use this reactionary power to sort of change the fact. Now, in terms of like specific to the wizard, which is a reroll, they re-roll and they just succeed again and it becomes a waste. This is the problem with most re-rolls. Now, I will freely admit that hope isn't the most exclusive resource because you get it. Not 65% of the time. I think it's like 50, what is it, like 50, 54 or something like that, 55% of the time. I don't know exactly what it is. Someone probably knows the math. You get it more than 50% of the time because of the crits. But the problem is, while hope may be generated, let's just say over half the time, your actions may be more limited. If you're playing with a group with 3 or 4 fellow party members, how many dice rolls are you going to get to make? And how fast are those hope points going to come back? So if you're cashing in 3 hope and it's a reroll and the GM rerolls the attack roll because you want to do something cool to save your rogue buddy and she ends up getting pasted anyways, I do think that can be kind of problematic. So I like reactions. So I like the wizard's hope feature, but just not for the wizard. And I don't know if the price is right. So there's one thing where I would say I kind of want to revisit some of the hope features. Alternatively, and additionally, I don't like, when you multi-class, it's weird that you get the class features, but you don't get the hope features, which is fine, I guess. But sometimes the class feature feels way more powerful and way more impactful than the hope feature. Now, I get that maybe they want to make multiclassing really powerful, but the advantage of giving people more hope features is that it's self-limiting because you need hope in order to be able to do it, right? So, case in point, right? Like, if you had 1 hope feature, and then I gave you 2 hope features, and then I gave you 5 hope features, it's not like you can use all of those hope features. Sure, you have more options to choose from, but you're still limited by how much hope you have. And so while it does give you this feeling and this, kind of expressiveness of being able to kind of dip into that area, it doesn't necessarily make it feel like you're just completely trampling all over the other people's classes. Whereas if you go and multi-class, say, into Guardian, let me bring up the PDF instead of just looking at the stupid thing that we're not actually even talking about. If you go and bring up the Guardian and you take a look at the Guardian subclass, it's like, okay, so if I multi-class into Guardian, I don't get spend 3 hope to clear 2 armor slots, which is cool, which is fine, helps you be a Guardian, neat, cool. But what you do get is their main primary class feature, which is once per day anyways, which means that, someone who multi-classes into Guardian is going to be able to do the unstoppable thing just as often as a Guardian is. And it's not like it's better or worse, and it scales exactly the same. And there's a part of me that just feels like that's a little bit too much stepping. If you're going to use classes, they didn't have to use classes, but they chose to use classes, and I'm okay with that. But I think there's a certain amount of niche that you should be able to carve out. Domains aren't niches. or domains aren't niche in the sense that they're already overlapping with 2 classes today. But as you start to add more classes, like, the Brawler or, the Assassin, more and more classes are going to have access to the Blade domain or the Codex domain or the Valor domain. So domains aren't really a great way for you to have class nicheness. So then the only 2 things that really make you class niche or the only thing that makes you really niche is your class feature, your hope feature, and your subclass features. But the problem is if someone multi-classes, they get your class feature, and they get a subclass, and they get potentially the specialization subclass. The only thing that someone who multi-classes can't get is the mastery feature. And that's fine, but that's also at the end of the game, and who often knows how often that would come up with. So I find it very strange that people who multi-class into Guardian don't get this kind of like extra little bonus thing. But what they do get is this massive, incredible thing here, which is really strange to me. So again, do I have an immediate solution to this? No, I haven't like reworked every single hope feature and figured out everything. Of course I haven't done that. But this is just the type of thing that just sort of pops into my brain when I'm thinking about that as we go through it. So for like Wizard, I just think it's really unflavorful. Okay. And then there's the Druid class feature, which is completely cooked, right? And not just because it's very powerful, and we could get into all the ways in which it is extremely powerful, but it's also just very powerful because anybody who multiclasses into Druid just gets full access to this incredibly complex, incredibly robust beast form, subset, which requires no additional, benefits in that respect. Well, Raul, that's not even true though, because what if you multi-class at level 6 and you take the proficiency bonus at level 5? What if you never take the proficiency bonus? Are you assuming that every single character in the game is going to take the proficiency bonus at tier 3 and tier 4? I don't think that's a broad assumption that you can make. Nor do I necessarily think that it is optimal or makes sense, because past a certain point, adding proficiency is going to just be wasted effort, right? Getting to a monster's severe threshold is not only the minimum, but it's the maximum that you should be able to do. There is no advantage to going over a monster's max threshold. And quite frankly, the amount of difference between two hit point marking and 3 hit point marking is, well, potentially very minimal. So it's a much bigger deal to go from 1 to 2, because that's a 100% increase, and when you go from 2 to 3, it's a 50% increase. So I think people kind of maybe are a little bit too 5e coded when they are like really hyping up the damage a ton, because I think at a certain point it just doesn't matter anymore. So again, we're kind of yeah, exactly. It is a diminishing return on proficiency bonus. Now, I will agree that when you go from tier 1 to tier 2, that is a massive increase in damage. You're doubling it. And that's also why they don't offer you a bonus that you can't take a proficiency bonus at tier 2, because then you'd be going from 1 to 2, and then you'd up it to 3, and it would be just a massive thing. But by the time you get to tier 3, your base proficiency is 3. So we're talking about going from 3 to 4, which, depending on the dice, depending on your bonus or whatever like that, might be roughly a 25% bonus. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes that's going to be the difference between doing 2 and 3 or doing 1 and 2. That's a big thing. But there is a disadvantage, or there is a penalty for doing 100 damage is just as good as 30 at certain points in the game. So anyways, so I just think the Druid ability is really cracked. So, but again, none of this has to do. But here's the real truth, though. I don't really even care, because whatever, it's a game, it's a fiction first game, and I'm not really upset about it. Like, sure, if someone in my party was a Druid and they were really cool about being a beast form, and then somebody was a Guardian, and then they multi-classed into Druid, now they can shapeshift just as well as the Druid. Like, I'd be like, come on, man, don't let them, don't steal their Kool-Aid. My problem is not even a problem. I use the term problem very loosely. When I say it's my problem, it doesn't mean like it's a problem. It means it's just a vibes thing for me, which is, so this is our circle of core classes and domains. All right. No surprises here. But I do have a problem with this circle, and I do have a problem with this domain, and it really actually has to do with this part of the map of the circle. So, going back to what would Daggerheart look like? Well, believe it or not, the first thing I would want to do is create, shocker, a circle of 12 domains and a circle of 12 classes. We can start cross-pollinating classes eventually, but my goal, say before adding a Valor Bone Brawler, is I would want to create 12 classes, 12 domains, and the overlapping between points between them, okay? So that's number one, okay? Now, here's my issue. I don't actually think let me be very clear about this here. Yes, so everything goes to 12. Yes, I am weird. I understand. Have I ever play tested a TTRPG? I have. I play tested 4th edition. I play tested 5th edition back when it was D&D 1. I play tested 13th Age. What other games was I like pretty involved with the playtesting perspective? I feel like there's one more, and I don't remember which other game it was. But those were the ones that I distinctly remember, for sure. I mean, I did give feedback when we did the Draw Steel playtest last year, but we only played like the one adventure the one time, so I don't really call that a playtest. Like with 5th edition and 4th edition and 13th Age, like we were playing and like following along with the updates and stuff like that. Okay, so to be clear, I actually don't have a problem with the rogue. I like that the rogue is a spellcaster. I actually think that's kind of neat. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a space for this, but what I'm imagining is when I envision a bard. Now, I have some problems with every domain as well. There's powers and spells and abilities that I don't really particularly love in their domains. Like, we can get into it, but as an example, I know it's D&D-ish, but like I don't like that Codex has Fireball. I don't like that Codex has Fireball. I don't. But when I think about a bard and I think about like what Codex represents, right, which is in my mind, it's like super Vancian, weird, arcane, formulaic, sort of like weird cross overlap stuff. Just strange arcane knowledge and weird magical effects. I'm like, yeah, that's a cool thing for the bard to have, Oh, I picked this up when I was in, I picked this up in Waterdeep. I picked this up whatever. And then, of course, the charm magic. I think this really helps describe what a bard is. And then we get to the midnight domain. Now, a lot of domains have to do heavy lifting for the class that they're associated with. The rogue classes in this game don't really have a lot of features. You have subclasses and you have the class features, but the rogue doesn't really have a laundry list of features that lets it do what it needs to do. So Midnight has to pick up a lot of the rogue baggage, like the ability to there's that one ability that you can have that gives you advantage on picking locks, and the one that makes it so that even if you fail moving silently, you can spend a stress and you succeed instead, right? Which is totally cool and totally fine. Okay. Oh yeah, sorry. This is Grace. I called it Charm, but I meant to call it Grace. So for a rogue to have this overlap of Grace and Midnight, I think is really cool. Where I have a problem with Midnight is what the fuck does that have to do with a sorcerer? And that's my problem. Like, it's weird to me. It starts to feel like, and again, this isn't a problem with the game. There's no reason why a sorcerer can't have lockpicking, but it reminds me of, this is going to be a very PF2 coded statement. It reminds me of the occult spell list. And I assume at this point, I assume a lot of people play Pathfinder 2, but I'll explain it anyways. The problem with the occult spell list is the occult spell list has to be two things. The occult spell list has to be weird, dark, Cthulhian stuff. It has to be strange, entities from another dimension, dark, weird, twisted, witchy type stuff. But occult is also the bard tradition. And that means that occult also has to have things like glittering fairy dust and, being really glib and being very, very, good at talking and all these other weird abilities that just doesn't make any sense. And so Jake says, as Jake says, it's the magic tradition of witches, psychics, and bards. It just doesn't make any sense to that. So for me, the problem with a domain like Midnight is that a domain like Grace is just a domain full of, socially coded stuff, whether it's buffs, debuffs, the whole 9 yards. And I feel like the rogue or the bard could do nothing but pick domain powers out of Grace, and they would end up feeling like a bard or a rogue, right? And I like that. I think that's really cool. You'd have this really, really smooth talking bard, and you'd have this really, really smooth talking rogue. I think that's really, really cool, right? And you could do this for a lot of them as well. Like, we could talk about Splendor and Wizard, but like Valor and Seraph and Valor and Guardian, cool. Like I don't think anyone would think it would be super weird if you had a Guardian who had nothing but Valor abilities and you had a Seraph that had nothing but Valor abilities. The problem with Midnight is I could totally see a rogue having nothing but Midnight abilities. They'd have some abilities like that let them pick abilities. They'd even have some cool little magical spells, some illusion magic, some darkness magic. It's not your daddy's rogue, right? This is a sort of a more fantastic rogue, a fantastic world. By the way, cracking open the white monster. But if a sorcerer took nothing but Midnight, I feel like that would be very weird. And so I just don't like. I just think it's kind of weird. So that's one of my problems. Again, it's not a problem because it's not broken. It's totally fine. It's completely fine. This is just a Derek vibe thing. Okay. So then we get to Arcane. And I like what they were trying to do with Arcane, but I hate it completely and it should be thrown away. Arcane to me, it's the worst domain. I don't understand what point it is trying to make. Because it's just a weird grab bag of abilities that don't really seem like they should belong to the sorcerer, as I understand the sorcerer, or the druid, as I understand the druid. Okay, I'm kind of being very broad here, and I'll get to some kind of a point at some point. But again, we're just here. This is a bonus stream. You paid for this. You've brought this upon yourself. I can go into more detail about Arcane, but fundamentally, my problem is in D&D. Now, spoiler alert. I like D&D 4th edition. Sorcerer in 3rd edition. It was Arcana. Sorcerer in 3rd edition and Wizard in 3rd edition D&D were literally the exact same class, except the sorcerer could cast more spells and they had this innate list. But they used the same spell list. They used everything. Functionally, unless you were really paying attention, you couldn't tell the difference between them. There was no in-world difference between the way they cast spells or even the type of spells that they cast. Wizard could cast Fireball. Sorcerer could cast Fireball. Wizard could cast Pass Wall. For some odd reason, maybe your sorcerer wanted to take Pass Wall. They could Pass Wall 6 times a day because that's what sorcerers did. The only thing that was different about it was how many spells you could cast per day versus, and did you have a spell book or did you, whatever. Yes, true. Also in 3rd edition, they did get their spells a tier later, which was also somehow terrible and didn't really need to be there either, which was also terrible. Like getting 2nd level spells at 4th level was such a beat. Anyways, that is true. Good point. Wizard got a couple bonus feats too. So Wizards, in my opinion, were just way better on every level. They made the sorcerer because they wanted people to be able to cast spells but not have to go through the rigmarole of prepping and remembering spells and picking from a list. They wanted Wizards historically in AD&D 1st edition, 2nd edition had been the complex class, and they wanted to make Wizards more accessible to people. So the idea, and even in fantasy nomenclature, Wizard, Sorcerer, these things were completely overlapped, and there was no formal definition of it in any stretch of the imagination. What we got, though, as we started to move through 3rd edition, and where we certainly landed in 4th edition, was that this idea that wizards gained their magical talent through study, laborious study, and that their effects were very formulaic, and sorcerers were summoning this kind of raw power. And in 4th edition, wizards were a controller class, which meant that they did AoEs and stuff like that, but they debuffed enemies, they locked them down. They didn't actually do a lot of damage. Wizards weren't the damage-dealing class, as they sometimes have been in D&D games. But the sorcerer was a striker. The sorcerer was there to summon up raw damage and cast it. That meant that the wizard and the sorcerer had completely different spells that had completely different purposes, that did completely different stuff, and it felt really, really cool. Now, the sorcerer wasn't great for having, an answer in their book of, their utility belt that they could pull out and bust out. As an aside, I hate that in Pathfinder 2 that a sorcerer can use all the scrolls. I don't even know why a sorcerer should be able to read from a scroll. There's no indication to me, that they should even be able to read magic, Anyways, but it also means that they don't really pay a price for lacking a spell book, And so I love the idea of the utility wizard and the blaster sorcerer. And so everything that Level 2 Janitor is saying, I completely agree with. Rather than they're both being blasters with also some utility sprinkles. So one of my problems that I have with the Arcana domain is that it has these weird utility spells in there that just don't really feel like they should belong to either the sorcerer or the druid. They actually feel more like spells that should be in Codex. But I also feel like there's spells in Codex that should be, guess what, in Arcana. Now, that doesn't mean that, that wizards shouldn't be able to do any damage and sorcerers shouldn't be able to have any utility, okay? Jacob Online says, Fireball, the most quintessentially sorcerer spell, is not available in either of the sorcerer domains. And, I tend to agree. Even the element of Fireball, which is that it's, in Daggerheart, where it's one of the few spells that is sort of uncontrolled, right? Where it can damage your allies. It's all targets, right? Friend and foe, right? As a result of that, it just doesn't make any sense of this. So we've talked about this a little bit on the thing here. Sorry, you need a book open. Adamo says, could you bring up the class domain descriptions in Daggerheart during this conversation? I feel like if we were building on critiquing ontology, we should understand the original text. To be fair, Adamo, I'm not critiquing their ontology. In fact, what I'm saying, Adamo, should not be taken as anything other than this is just how I feel about the role of class definitions in the game. It has nothing to do with what their aim to do. Like, for example, I think if you ask 99% of people, well, maybe not 99%, but 99% of people, and say, what is a quintessential wizard spell? They would say Fireball. And I ordinarily would agree with you. Except my perception and understanding of that's fine. But if you're going to put the sorcerer into the game, then I think that starts to change the definition a little bit. So that's that's kind of my problem for that. Now, the other issue I have is I don't necessarily know that I agree with its role in the Druid list as either. So one of the things that I would want to change is I would create a new domain and I would call it, I don't know, elemental or elements or, some clever name that is a play on word of elemental. And I would put that between the druid and the sorcerer. Okay. And I would unplug. Now, remember, I said I would want to sort of expand the wheel, right? So I would sort of be, now there's other things that we could change, but I would sort of be moving this up, and I would be breaking off Midnight, okay, from sorcerer. So we'd have to come up with a new domain for the other sorcerer domain, okay? So elemental would be airbending, earthbending, waterbending, firebending. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not utility in there. I think right now, the Arcana domain has fly. Okay? Well, I think fly should be that's an awesome elemental spell, whether you're a druid or a sorcerer, the idea of summoning winds and, pushing people up and doing all this other stuff, I think that's really cool. And I think that's really awesome. So you could totally have, kind of this sort of, whatever element to it, right? Anyways. So that means we need another domain for sorcerer. And we can get back to that in a second. But the other thing that I have a problem with, this is not, it's not a problem. I keep using the term problem. Ignore it. There are no problems. There are no problems. It's just me being Derek. Okay? So level 2 janitor. I hear what you're saying. I don't think we should completely pigeonhole people entirely. I will say this. I liked that they gave the wizard levitate. And I liked that the sorcerer gained fly. Now, this is just a Derek thing. But for whatever reason, in my brain, a sorcerer levitating something, or a wizard levitating something, or me, or a person, or a rock, or whatever, that feels very wizardy. A wizard zipping around like Superman doesn't feel very wizardy to me. But a sorcerer jetting around with, get gusts of wind and flames coming out the back or whatever, that feels more appropriate for me. It feels more raw. It feels more uncontrolled, especially if you add sort of an element of maybe danger to the flying, effect, not make it completely safe or something like that. I think that sounds really, really cool, but especially if, the flying, if the fly ability is sort of like you can just blast fire, if fly was defined as you can just blast wind out of you and you can zip around, right? That's what fly does. It gives you a fly speed and it's really, flying around. But with levitate, you make it more utilitarian. You could levitate yourself. You could levitate an enemy as a debuff. You could levitate an ally to move them around or to reposition them or to get them up high. Maybe you could even levitate an object to lift a boulder up or move something, right? So that's how I view levitation as becoming more of a, and we almost get to kind of a Cosmere RPG there, So anyways, so that's my one thing, all right? Elemental. The next is the Sage domain. Now, I don't have an actual problem with the Sage domain. Other than that, I would kind of like kill it. Well, I would do a couple things with Sage domain, probably. One, I would probably kill it, and then so I could reuse its name maybe somewhere else. It's a good name. It's a good name for a domain, and I think we should reuse it. The second problem I have with the Sage domain is that it doesn't really reflect what I want the Druid to do. So now this gets into another thing. Again, we're just, we're bouncing all over the place here. But so I would say that the Druid should be a mix of elemental and what I am calling. Now, originally, I was going to call it wild, but and I don't know if they're going to stick with this or not. But when the Daggerheart published these example cards, they called them wild cards, and they're like from the wild domain. So, we have to come up with something different. So, something a little bit more flavorful that I came up with. I mean, I'm sure it's not crazy because I'm just taking it from 4th edition, is the primal domain. And of course, in 4th edition D&D, the Druid in Player's Handbook 2 came from the primal power source, right? Now, this is where things get a little crazy. I think you should start calling your new game Daggerheart so you can say the next thing that would be different in Daggerheart. Okay. You know what, Jess? I like that pretty good. All right? I like that a lot. We'll actually go with that. So what I want from the primal domain in Daggerheart is, this is where I get a little bit different. And again, it's not because it's a problem, although I do think the Druid's kind of a big problem, but whatever. Here's what I would change for primal. The primal domain, so the Druid, from a class feature perspective, okay, the Druid would lose beast form as a class feature. It would no longer be a class feature for Druid. Okay? I think it's too powerful to just be in a class feature. I think it's too versatile to be in a class feature. I think it's too easy to abuse with multiclass for a class feature, and and all that other stuff. I think it's just It's way too much. So what I would do instead is I would create a series of primal domain cards. Okay? The primal domain cards, now again, you could just do this on your sheet of paper, of course, too, but the primal domain cards would be double-sided. Okay? And we could come up with a name with it. Alternatively, I was saying, like, the one side could be called, like, you know, the bloom, or the one side could be called, like, I can't remember the term I came up with, but the other side would be called, like, the beast side or the feral side. Your cards in primal would be double-sided. And the druids, when people have access to that domain, one of the things that they can do is shape change. And when they shape change, they'll take all of their cards in their loadout and they'll flip them over. Now, this does a couple of things. Number one, it means that in order to, now, when you flip them over, the other side will have your beast form abilities. And this means instead of getting all those crazy beast form abilities for free, you would have to use your cards for them, okay? The second thing is, and again, I'm going off on a lot of tangents here. It's still, you know, druids are broken. There's no doubt about it. But the druids, as written, don't really get to use most of their cards when they're shape changed. And that's not fun. That's not fun for them. You have cool cards. You should be able to use them, and you should want to use them. So that's number one. Number two, when you shape change, you flip all your cards over. And that means that your other domain cards get flipped over to a back, which does nothing. So this prevents the druid from stacking their shape-shifting powers with other abilities that were never meant to sort of be benefited from it and becoming broken. Like when people used to talk about how, like, a guardian druid is a better guardian than a guardian. You can make now druid abilities, which are very strong, but don't stack with other abilities, because if you had a really good guardian domain power in your loadout and you shape changed, that guardian power would flip over, it would be face down, and so you would lose access to it. It also means that druids who really want to focus on being good at wild shaping have to fill their loadout with primal cards. Because if you were a druid and you had your loadout fixed with a mixture of elemental and primal spells, when you shape changed, most of your cards would be face down and would do nothing. So, any case, it kind of encourages you to sort of push your way towards primal, okay? Secondly, because primal abilities, now your beast shaping abilities, are tied to domain cards, if you do multiclass into druid, you're limited by the level of the card that you can choose, right? So instead of getting the best form of wild shape that exists in the game, if you're level 6 or something and you multiclass into druid, you can now start to take level 3 or lower primal cards, which will allow you some shape-shifting capability, but not all of the shape-shifting capability. So again, I think that it's actually cooler, because as a druid, I think it'd be neat to have to make a kind of decision between being this kind of druid or being that kind of druid, instead of just being like, well, I'm good at everything, right? Well, no, as I said before, we would completely eliminate the class feature, and we would give it a completely different class feature entirely, like entirely. So the class feature whole thing would get completely reworked, right? Now, tentatively, I know some people feel a different way about this, and I do think there's a space in the wheel for this. I would leave the druid or the ranger as primal and bone. I don't mind the idea of the why would you flipping multi-class cards? What does that mean? You mean the domain cards? So as written, if we kept it like this, rangers could shapeshift. Now, I don't know if I know people have weird ideas about rangers, and some people, it's like a lot of people are very upset about the rogue having spells. I know there's a lot of people who really like the idea of, okay, there's Duskwall for some reason. I know there's people who really, really dislike the idea of spellcasting rangers. And so again, I'm a big fan of that. But I think I'm okay with it, is what it comes down to. Because remember, too, the primal cards are double-sided. Okay, so the other side of primal will have things like your entangle ability, you know, or maybe some sort of, you know, nature's healing, or some sort of, you know, your nature magic side, right? There's going to be two sides to it. So your ranger could, you know, stack up on entangle spells and, you know, animal friendship spells or whatever they're using. They don't necessarily need to or have to reference the other side. That being said, if you wanted to kind of do more of a shapeshifter warrior build, then you could go ranger, who really focuses on taking a lot of primal cards and using that shape changer, you know? So again, none of this is like thought out in anything in Daggerheart. It's more of just like when I read the abilities, when I read the cards, I was kind of like, I don't. This is what's kind of you know, feeling it to me. So hold on a sec. Here we go. So yes, we're keeping the Rangers primal. If you flip vitality, well, again, there's nothing that is currently in the game works with this system at all. If you change this kind of thing, you would have to fundamentally recreate entire swaths of this class and all of these domains. So, yeah, exactly. Rangers could be a berserker type, or someone who focuses on being a shape-shifting, you know, fighter. And as I said before, we wouldn't throw away Sage entirely. We would pick its corpse for a lot of the primal abilities. You know, that would be totally fine on the nature magic side as opposed to the animal side, right? Or another way to think of it is sort of like, you know, maybe the one side is plants and the other side is animals, right? The other one side is plants, the other side is sort of shape changing and stuff like that nature. Great question. So my idea is that, and I haven't really thought through this entirely, is that every card, because I don't like that shapeshifting is just static. I would prefer for the shapeshifting to actually give you interesting, cool things that you can spend your abilities and resources on. And so there's kind of this idea that like one of the cards from Primal, and that maybe you just gain it for free, is one of the cards is that you can shape change. And it's basically a tax. You get it for free, but it you know, it's in your vault for free. But to have it in your loadout is a tax, essentially. And maybe it does something minor mechanical. Because I just think the reality of the situation is, in what I've created here, is a class that can get 5 cards in their loadout and then, you know, pull some rigmarole and flip all of them to 5 entirely new classes features. Or 5 entirely new domain abilities. That's powerful. That's a lot of versatility, right? Other people would have to spend a shitload of stress to do that kind of swapping. So I think it does highlight the versatility of the Druid. Now, it does mean that you need to, you know, fucking think about a little bit about what powers and abilities you choose, as opposed to being like, well, I have access to every single beast form in the entire book. I can be whatever I want at any time, and I don't have to pay anything price for it. Oh, Dirk, you have to take 1 stress. Please. Half the monsters in the book just, like, deal stress just cuz. When you can heal D6 stress off of like a bardic inspiration die. I'm not saying stress isn't nothing. I'm just saying it's a very low quest. But anyways, point is, it would kind of eat up a slot. And then what the abilities would do on the back side of the primal card would be, if you've ever played like a video game like Diablo 2 or World of Warcraft, you'll know that when you go into your beast form, you get access to specific abilities that are usable only in that beast form. So, for example, you could take, one of the cards might be like a swipe, or like a rake or something like that, right? And you get this new spell or ability that you can use, but only when you're in your shape-changed form, if that makes any sense. So you like spellcasting rangers, rogues, and bards, but you wish you existed with non-magic equivalents. Yeah, I don't know. For me, rangers, bards, and even to a certain extent rogues have been magical the entire time I've played D&D since the 1980s. So for me, it's kind of what for me, it's normal. Now, Mark is disagreeing because he says the whole reason to play a druid is just so you can be very powerful and win all the time. I don't dislike that idea at all, Don Pokey. The idea that a ranger could use their primal cards while being not shape changed, but allow their animal companion to use the ability instead. That's kind of sweet. I kind of like that. So I think I would buy this book. We're not even done yet. I've described nothing. Yes, and to be clear here, I'm being very inspired by my time playing other card games, including Magic the Gathering. There's absolutely no, absolute case about this. I would love to see them transform into flipping cards, Kendall. In fact, when I first saw transformation cards, I think they're awesome, and obviously I gave them all like 10s out of 10s and 9s out of 10s in the void, but that's exactly what I thought they were going to be. I was kind of like, oh no. So, well, the difference is that I wouldn't have defined beast forms anymore here. I wouldn't, it would just be description, and it would be fluff, and it would be fictional, and you could just make it up whatever you want to make it up. I think that already the beast forms are overly powerful, and one of the reasons why the beast forms are overly powerful, rightfully so, is because when a druid goes into the beast form, let's assume, ignore multiclassing. When a druid goes into the beast form, they can't use their spells, and most of the druid's abilities, which are from Sage and Arcana, are spells. So by default, the druid doesn't get any access to any of their abilities when they're in beast form, but they still need to keep up with other classes which do have access to all of their abilities. And that meant in order to make the druid work in beast form and not just be like, hey, you turn into a bear, but you can never hit anything and you can't do any damage, they had to give the bear all sorts of stat bonuses and buffs and change everything that they do. I'm less interested in doing that because instead I'm going to give you abilities and spells that you can use while you're shape change. And just like every other class in the game, you would use that. So that is an option to tie the druid's beast form ability to the subclass cards. Already, as we talked about before, I think that's a good idea because then it just limits them. So the multi-class characters can never get mastery tier 4. I think we talked about this when we first reviewed the game. I was like, oh wow, when we first came back and we were looking at the druid, and I was like, wow, these are really powerful, and multi-class characters get access to everything. This kind of solves that problem because, for example, if you multi-classed into druid or ranger, you would never get access to the level 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 spells or abilities. So it would keep you, from this other, keep you from the most powerful abilities, which I think is fine. Yeah. Correct. Yes. The beast form card would be a card. Like, for example, you don't have to put it into your loadout, but if you have it in your loadout, it's a spell, and it's called Wild Shape, or presumably, and then when you activate it, you flip it over, and it would say, when you flip this over, flip over every other card in your in your loadout, blah blah blah. There'd be some rules text or whatever, and maybe it does something, as well. But predominantly, it would just exist to sort of eat up a spot and be the thing. And it would basically be like you're in your animal form, So that's kind of what I wanted to do with Primal. And again, there's still probably place and space for that to exist. So again, this is just one area of the game. To believe it or not, let's take a real quick break separately to kind of now. Obviously, some of the changes I don't even know that I need to talk about them in Daggerheart, right? Are things like what I talk about. When I talk about in all my streams, things like dynamic spotlighting, I would probably make that more of the rule of the game. There's a couple of places where I think that players should be able to spend their resources and make a decision after the die is rolled, rather than before. And believe it or not, that's not for the reason that you think it is. It's actually because I find that at tables, it's really kind of like annoying when it's somebody else's turn, and I'm not saying that you might be paying attention, right? But they suddenly pick up their dice and they attack, right? They pick up their dice and they make the roll, and you're like, oh, I was going to help you, but they've already picked up their dice and rolled the dice, And I like helping and I like reactions, but what I don't like is abilities that cause people to be like, no, don't, wait, stop, I'm going to help you. Or I don't like abilities where it's your turn, you're really excited, you pick up your dice, and then you go, does anybody want to help me? This is a personal bugaboo issue. Sometimes it is inevitable, and we can't avoid it. But by and large, I kind of prefer it when we do these things after a roll, because then there's time. It eliminates that sort of awkward pause, that awkward break in the momentum on the turn, which I really, really like. Or I should say, I really like eliminating that awkward pause or that awkward step. And I really don't like it when somebody else, this is just a personal pet peeve, it's someone else's turn and some other player, well-meaning, cuts them off in the middle of their description and their turn because they see they're about to roll their dice and they wanted to do something. And they're being very nice. I mean, like, they want to help this person. They might even be willing to spend their resources to help that person. But it's just a Derek thing. It's just a Derek thing, Absolutely, I love counterspells, but that's because Lugs, Magic the Gathering, is extremely formulated on the passing of priority between two people. I don't know how the fuck anybody does it in Commander. I guess you're supposed to pass priority around the entire table. That sounds horrible. But when I am playing Magic the Gathering, I put spells on the stack, as many as I want, and then before I can begin resolving those spells at one at a time, I have to pass priority to my player or my opponent so that they can cast spells. So yes, I like reactions. I don't like interruptions. Yes, I like reacting to the effect. I don't like interrupting other people. I think that's very annoying. And in fact, as if to prove Lugs's point, well, actually to not prove Lugs's point, originally in Magic the Gathering didn't have a stack. Magic the Gathering didn't use a stack-based resolution system, and there were actually two different types of spells. There were instants, and there were interrupts. And if you note, if you've played Magic the Gathering in the last 25 years, there are no interrupts anymore. They got rid of them, and everything is an instant. Because there was no need to interrupt your opponent, because now they have to put a spell on the stack, and now they have to give you an opportunity to respond with your stack before they proceed. Okay, clockwise around the table. Okay, fair enough. So, in any case, point is, I like that sort of. I like things to be fast and feral and victorious. Now, and by the way, if you're like me, this comes up all the time in your game. Somebody has a cool ability that they can help somebody else, and it's Vin's turn, and he's really excited, and he's caught up in it, and he goes, he's like, yeah, I run over, and I'm going to bring my axe up, and I'm just going to smash it down, and I roll the dice, and you're like, hope, 17 with hope, and I know we needed 18 or something like that. And somebody else on the table goes, no, I was going to help you, I was going to aid you, I was like setting up for that. And then you go, oh, and then the GM goes, all right, fine, you can aid him. You can roll your dice anyways. We almost all do that. I think we all almost do that anyways. Am I wrong? Maybe it's just me. But, like, you get what the person was trying to do. It's a cool moment. You want to, help everybody out. And so you always let them do the thing that they were supposed to do before, but you let them do it anyways, right? And the game isn't, like, horribly misbalanced or worse off for it. So I think that's fine. And I think it's more than fine in Daggerheart because most of the time when you're doing these kind of actions, they cost a resource. They cost stress. They cost hope. So you're not getting away with this for free. It's limited and it costs you stuff. So it's not like it's a problem. Like if it was like, oh, I'm going to help him, and it doesn't cost me anything. Maybe it costs me my reaction, or maybe it costs me my action. But I only help when they need it, and I do it afterwards, and it doesn't cost me any sort of permanent resource, or even any sort of temporary resource. I would just help all the time. And then it's like, yeah, okay, this is stupid. Because then it's just like, okay, I'm waiting. Oh, they need it, I'll help. But, like, if you make it cost a resource, and Root, by the way, which we did, Root works like this. You help. The help action in Root is essentially a reaction after they've, it's a reaction after their roll is done, and you help, and it costs you some stress or something, or exhaustion or whatever, and it just works. There's not even a die roll. So it's broken, right? You basically wouldn't help someone unless it's going to help them out completely. But it's fast, it's quick, and more importantly, you avoid that awkward moment where the person rolled the dice, or I don't know. Because I know. It's like, oh, Derek, it's D&D. That's what's supposed to happen. Because I have another problem. I know it's not fair. It's a dice game. It's why we roll dice. But if people are paying resource, which they are in Daggerheart, they're paying hope in order to help a player. If people are paying their resource, okay, and they all chip in, and they all help you, and then the person rolls a 1-3 on their duality roll, and then they miss, and everybody contributed a ton of resources, and it didn't make a difference. I get it. Like, that's part of the game, Derek. Well, it doesn't have to be, and I don't like that kind of game. Not saying it's great or terrible, but, like, because randomness is fun. Because to put a point to it, in Root, helping, I think, gives +2. Let me see. Persuade, read, trust, wreck. Okay, help or interfere. When you help or interfere with another vagabond, mark an exhaustion, which is like stress, to add +1, okay, or -2 to their roll after they're rolling. Okay, so in other words, let's say in Root, somebody needed to get 10 to succeed. 10 is a success with no complications, right? This is PBTA. 10 is a success with no complications. A 7, 8, 9 is a success but with a complication. So let's say the group is really hoping to get a 10, and the player rolls, and I describe, and I get an 8. Well, cool. Now we have this cool moment at the table where 2 other players, because it stacks in this game, can contribute their resources and describe how they're helping, and we know that that's going to push us from an 8 to a 10, and we're going to get that success. So there's no randomness. If you have enough resources in the party, you can make that success happen. It's not the end of the world. But that's not necessarily the most exciting thing at times. What I love the idea of is that in Daggerheart, you roll a d6 after the fact. And it's because what's weird, again, I'm not an expert at Daggerheart, and so I might be wrong here. Heroic, when heroes help you, it stacks in a weird way, right? Like every player who's helping you gets to roll a d6, but you only take the highest value, right? Or something like that. So I love the idea of like somebody needs a 16 to succeed, and they roll, and they get a 13. So they missed. So it's a failure with hope. And if you could get 3 more points, it would turn it to a success. And so your allies can describe how they're helping you, spend a hope, and roll a d6. So it's kind of chancy. They might not get it. If they roll a 1 or 2, they don't succeed. And then if one of your allies doesn't get it, because they only rolled a 1 or 2, another player could then spend a hope. And you could theoretically go around the entire table and no one would ever actually succeed, which is a possibility. But I think that's a cool sweat. Again, it might sound, you're like, Derek, you sound very inconsistent about this. Maybe. It's just vibes. It's just how I feel. I'm just imagining like, or let's make it a little bit more. You need a 17 and you rolled a 12. So you need 5 more points. And helping is a d6. And so then the group is like, it's very obvious that, it has to make sense in the fiction. You can't just always auto-help. But even if you could, it's going to cost everybody a hope. Like, is the entire party willing to cash in 4 hope? But I love this idea of sort of going around the table and sort of trying to help. Now, of course, they don't stack, right? It's whoever, you can try to get to your highest possible roll. And so I think that's kind of a neat sweat. I think that's kind of like, I kind of like that. Now, the reason why I think it's fine to have more than one person kind of help is because it's a team-based game about team-based heroes, and that's what heroes do. They work together to solve problems. Now, I still think it should make sense in the fiction. How does a warrior help a sorcerer with his Unleash Chaos spellcasting roll? Great question. I mean, it comes down to what do you think the spellcasting roll represents? Do you think the spellcasting roll represents the person hitting with the Unleash Chaos? Or do you think the spellcasting roll represents the sorcerer trying to control the energy so that they can even release the spell? Great question. And my answer would be probably both. And if they are trying to attack somebody and the warrior's on the other side of the battlefield, chances are probably good. I'm pretty sure that the warrior probably maybe can't help. Not everyone can help in every single situation. But they could help by making an opening in the warrior stance. Or maybe, because we're badass fantasy superheroes, maybe your warrior throws their sword out, the chaos energy imbues into it, and then they bring it with their blade crashing down into the enemy. What do I care? As long as the mechanics are the same and it does what it Unleash Chaos does, it's fine, I mean, yeah, we could go full anime and just say, oh, there's a tear in reality. I reach in my hands and I tear the reality open even more with my raw strength. Hulk smash. I don't care. I mean, it depends on that. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of different possibilities and options. And I think that's, I think that's cool. And I also think, though, that the fiction, the fiction might matter as well, too. Because here's the thing. Let's say the warrior makes some sort of bullshit stretch. And I go, all right, totally what you can... well, because again, there's the number one rule, which should be applied to every role-playing game, is don't be a weasel. I don't care. You can kill all the monsters. I don't give a shit. What do I care if you kill all the monsters? It doesn't matter. I have infinite of them. You can't die anyways. What are we even doing here? We're only here to make cool stories and have fun. So if you're trying to be some sort of weird dick weasel in order to win some game that it doesn't even remotely matter. I mean, it doesn't matter in any role-playing game, but I'm not going to pretend that like D&D and Pathfinder and those games don't have a winner and a loser. There's winning, there's losing. This game definitely not. So yeah, that's all I'm trying to say. It's like, it's just like, yes, it's a problem. Like, it'd be like if you're like, I have this problem. Like every time I play softball with this guy, he keeps or I'm golfing with this guy and he brings in one of those golf clubs that's got like a bullet in it and he keeps driving for like 400 yards and it's like I don't know, just don't play with him then. He's clearly not about the game, like. So anyways, back to what we were saying before. So I like this idea of this sort of swappable flippable card. I think it's cool. I think it's flavorful, and I think it makes the Druid feel a little bit different. And then our Druid would end up having these sort of elemental abilities and these sort of primal abilities. Now, that means we need another domain to give the Sorcerer. Now, I've played around and I've thought about this in a couple different ways. And I think what I like, and I'm not even sure what this would necessarily be, it's more of a vibe thing, is some kind of, and we kind of saw some of this is stealing from the corpse of Arcana as well, is some sort of chaos. Raw, raw magic. Not the kind of, like, there's some elements of Arcana that definitely felt raw, magic-y, chaosy. I liked that, actually. And could really feature a lot of, strange, wild occurrences, right? The Wild Mage was originally a subclass for the Wizard. But I think a lot of people associate wild magic now with sorcerers. And in fact, 4th edition D&D, which introduced the sorcerer class, had 3 or two spell sources. Like what was the source of your sorceress magic? Dragon magic and wild magic. And I think we get to some of the elements there with the elemental, although dragon sorcerer could be a cool subclass. But I also think that having a sort of chaos type domain kind of gives us some options, right? If for no other reason, then I don't know what class it would be, but I feel like even if we didn't create some sort of new domain here, I feel like a chaos midnight class is at least something that makes a little bit more sense than a midnight sorcerer. I'm not entirely sure what this could be, but it could be some sort of like, I don't know, like trickster mage type vibe, something like that. I don't exactly know what it would be, but there's something there, and I think that's kind of interesting. And that, to me, vibes have more that sort of, feels more interesting in that respect. We talked extensively, Kai, for many, many minutes about exactly where the sorcerer came from in 3rd edition. So, Varendor, with a very awesome take, says, Daggerheart is a dumb game with badly and vaguely written rules where everything is flavor, narrative, and fiction because they write horrible rules. Anything in the story could be what players want. I mostly agree with all of that, except for it being badly written. But that's what makes it great, Varendor. So anyways, but yeah, anyways, and I don't think the sorcerers in 3rd edition needed to be a full level behind wizards. In fact, I think in some version of the game, they no longer do that anymore. Daggerheart does feel like something. It's very Rayo, man. It's very difficult to understand why people are very upset about games that they will never play. I don't know. It is what it is. Well, again, there's some people who play games to win the game. If you are playing a role-playing game so that you can win it, and again, I think there's a lot of games that actually are like that. I think D&D is designed like that. I think Pathfinder 2 is designed like that. Whether people use the game for that intended purpose is different, but I think those games are designed to be beaten. Those games are designed for you to win. I don't think this is that game. Anyways, so that brings up the sort of Valor, Splendor, Wizard Codex thing. Now, you know, and how people want to feel a certain way about the rogue or whatever. But I don't necessarily hate that the wizard has access to the Splendor domain. And I don't necessarily hate that the Seraph does either. I like the Guardian with Blade and Valor. I think that's really cool. I like the Warrior with Bone and Blade. The Ranger is in a weird space, I will admit. I'm not sure what role it is, but what I do know is that it's important to me that the Ranger just doesn't feel like another fighter. My problem with a Martial Ranger is a Martial Ranger is just a fighter with a bow, but they're like, but he has hunt prey. And I'm like, so? What difference does that make? Like, that's implying that, like, fighters can't hunt a prey. You know, it's a very strange kind of a vibe that I have. Again, I think it's fine if you want to play a Martial Ranger, but I know it's kind of messed up that, like, the warrior, like, if you want to play a Martial Ranger, and this is what is kind of messed up about it, but like in the sense of like non-magical, I just shoot bows, pew pew pew. I'd be like, well, you should be a warrior then. You know, you're not a ranger, you're a wilderness warrior. You're like, no, I have to be a ranger because that's the class name and that's what it means. I'm like, well, no, the ranger is a shape-changing, you know, nature-controlling wilderness, you know, sort of avenger. To that respect. Now, if you want to change it and you want to call the ranger like a hunter class, okay, that's fine. You know, they also obviously, you know, the other thing too is like, is putting the ranger into this idea of, do you want to put the ranger into a pigeonhole of having a sort of, you know, like so we have a blade domain, right? Like, do we want to make a bow domain, right? You know, right. Does the barbarian really need to exist? You know, is a barbarian just a warrior that they gave a rage ability to? Can you just put a rage ability into the blade domain and do something with that? Now, the blade domain by default kind of applies to all weapons. They didn't want to, like, you know, hamstring people into just being a, you know, one type of weapon. Now, I'm not going to lie. When I'm playing a class-based game, I have biases, and I accept them. And part of that bias is, and this is just me, I don't see the Guardian or the Warrior as being a ranged weapon wielder. I mean, that's not to say that they wouldn't have a ranged weapon, but I just don't see them as predominantly having ranged weaponry, right? And so the idea of a character that exists as sort of a ranged weapon specialist is kind of you know, kind of interesting in that respect. But you know, it's cool that they can be, but I'm just saying that in terms of like when you the reason why classes are cool is because it kind of focuses your attention, and I just think that, like, yes, a ranged guardian kind of doesn't make sense, and then like people will try to make it make sense, and then they'll try to have a lot of stuff. Anyways, the only reason I was trying to point out is like there could be a world where you sort of take out, like, you make the ranger some sort of different class that ties into our primal domain, and then add in some sort of like new domain that's more of like a, like if we were to add like a and this is theoretical, so I'll probably delete this, but like if you had like literally something called like a bow domain, and you know, again, we could call it something completely different, but oh man, they should totally do that, but they don't do that at all, do they? And like you brought the ranger down here, and now the ranger is bone and bow, and now we have some sort of new class here, you know, because again, remember, I wanted to get to 12 classes in our core game. I don't know if aim is the term I would go with. Not that there's a great name for anything here, but I don't know if it knows it has to be a specific weapon. No, now that's not a bad idea. Like we could turn this, and we're just calling it the bow domain, right? Like we could have, what am I doing here? We could have like a hunter here, and then we could have like, kind of the ranger there, or we could have like the Beastmaster or something like that there. I mean, we're getting a little bit hyper specific here. I don't necessarily know that I like this idea. I'm just kind of going with what the chat is saying as well. But anyways, yeah, I don't know if I would go ballistic domain as well there, but I mean, Beowulf, but see, this is, I know you're putting a smiley face there at the wink, but like, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, though, and I know you're being deliberately flippant. It's like, well, no, but this is a class-based design. Like, I think a lot of people, when they homebrew and they house rule, they don't try to respect the game that they're house ruling enough. Maybe that's just my fault. That's my problem is that I really think about that, too much. Maybe we could call it like, I don't know, the precision domain or something like that. I don't know if that's something that's crazy, but anyways, there's something to be said there. Yeah, I mean, I think when I say weapon specific, like I wouldn't want there to be a mace domain and then a hammer domain and an axe domain. I think blade is sort of enough of a catch-all domain name for melee weapons. You know what I mean? And something to that effect. But I wanted to come over here real quick, and I wanted to get into this because so for example, do I think that it's cool to like do I think coming up with new domain structures and new things for Daggerheart is a good idea? No, not really. But do I think you could do that and exist within the framework of Daggerheart? Absolutely. But if you start coming into Daggerheart and you start like removing classes and doing this other stuff, like I think that's when you're like kind of getting in trouble. That's where I'm like having some things to do. But let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So yeah, we just need one more. I do like the name of Steel. Actually, Nate, I kind of really like that a lot. I'm going to steal that just because I think it's cool. Okay, so here's the problem I have. The problem I have is that, so again, this one is me just kind of responding to chat. I don't necessarily know that I would necessarily go with this whole like Beastmaster, thing. I'm just kind of putting that in there, this precision domain. And that way people can have a melee hunt ranger or something like that. That's a little bit different than this. And I don't know, something to that effect. Bone and steel, bone and precision. Anyways. So we get over to here. We have the wizard, we have Splendor, and then we have the Seraph, and then we have the Guardian. Now, the wizard is like the most wizardy wizard, right? They're a caster, like full and through. But again, it's weird because the Seraph is doing a lot of heavy lifting. You know what I mean? Like, the Guardian is as martial as they get. And the wizard is not only the wizard super, spell heavy, but like they're in most people's mind the wizardy wizardist. And so the thing that is supposed to get us from this class to this class, from these domains to these domains, is the Seraph. And while I don't have a problem with the Seraph, I just don't think it does enough of that lifting, if that makes any sense. Now, I understand the problem with the Seraph is kind of clearly supposed to be like the cleric, but it's like not the cleric, and it's kind of supposed to be the paladin, but it's kind of like not the paladin. So I don't know what we're supposed to do here. You know, did I just draw steel on the whiteboard? I did. The other problem is, and this is just you know, this is just me being me. I don't think the serif design is really that good. The class, I mean, I don't find the class interesting. I don't find the winged sentinel particularly interesting. I just don't think that there's a lot, you know, going on there. In that respect. Now, to be clear here, I have no problem with us not recreating D&D. I actually think it's cool that there's this new class. I just don't know what that class is. I don't know how to explain the serif to somebody. That's my problem. That's my problem. And you know, obviously, you know, people who are more familiar with Critical Role than me are saying there was some sort of cleric character from Vox Machina, and obviously they wanted to be able to create analogs for Critical Role's most famous characters and put them into Daggerheart because, you know, whatever they could do, right? You know, be that specific. And so most people just end up calling this, you know, if you're describing the serif, you say, oh, it's a paladin, you know, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a combination of paladin and cleric, sure. I just don't think it fulfills any particular class fantasy particularly well. I actually agree with that, especially with its things. And I just feel also like it's still doing a lot of work going from the guardian to the wizard, you know? And it's there's a sort of natural, you know, sort of, to me, there's sort of a natural progression when you go from wizard to bard to rogue to trickster mage to sorcerer to druid to beastmaster to hunter to warrior to guardian, and then you get the serif to wizard. That join there feels very disjointed to me, and so this is an area where I would like to create some sort of additional class to put into this original thing, and maybe potentially, you know, some sort, and then obviously there would need to be some sort of new domain as well, and maybe it also potential that it could be something completely different, and maybe the Splendor domain gets completely killed off, just like we did with Sage, and we remake it. Well, no, I don't think going from Guardian to Paladin to Cleric to Wizard isn't also not what I want to do at all. I kind of do want a red mage. That's not the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. So I don't know. I don't know what the domain is. Again, I don't really have answers for all these things. I'm just simply saying that even outside of my desire to want to have 12 classes, I think that there's a desire for me to kind of put in this element here.
Edwalk tip $20. Ooh, whiteboard. Here's some money. Any idea when your session 0 will be? #Daggerhype, #Daggerreaches.
Oh, well, thank you, Edward. So we were just talking about that. You know, we got a lot of progress done. There's lights hanging. There's cameras hanging from the studio. I do have to wire everything up. I'm going to be going to PAX next week, or in a week and a half, and then I have a Vegas trip. Session 0 will probably be in September because I'm just going to be traveling a lot for the next couple weeks. But we're definitely going to be doing several Session 0s, you know, at least 2, to get everything set up. So that is the answer. And then, like I said, our goal, I think, is to try to sort of, you know, book because I have to work with their agents, aka their wives. I have to work with my buddies, you know, Smith and Bob and stuff like that, to figure out and their kids, to figure out what their schedule is. And then what we're going to try to do is try to get like 3 or 4 weeks in a row that everybody can commit to. And then we're going to play for 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And then it's possible that we might take a break of a week or 2 while people's, you know, schedules are shitty. And then we come back and we do a couple more episodes in a row. So rather than us doing like episodes like, oh, we're doing weekly episodes, and then like every other week or every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. Like we're canceling. I don't want to do that to people. So if my team of guys can only commit to the next 2 or 3 weeks, then I'm going to tell everybody that those are the 3 weeks that are on the calendar, and be prepared that we might play those 3 weeks, and then the following week after that, no holds bar, and we'll sort of reassess and sort of do it in these sort of chunks. Define red mage, because I'm not familiar with the term. A red mage is a Final Fantasy term. It means they are a fighter type character who can cast. They're not the best fighter, but they can cast some black magic and they can cast some white magic. They can cast some protection spells and they can cast some damaging spells. Not the best spells, not the worst spells. Some of the spells. It's sort of like the OG sort of like hybrid character. It's kind of like the way the bards were supposed to be if like you removed the music part of it and made them less roguey and made them a little bit more war-y. A melee black magic, white magic user, exactly. Ivar, it's about whatever we want it to be. Look, not gonna lie, I have always wanted a Magus spellsword class to fit in before the wizard. I mean, it is a nice transition, I think, in that respect. You typoed your own name? Okay. I was wondering who. I was like, why are you Edark? That's not bad. Wonder is kind of a cool idea. I don't know what we put in there, but it's kind of interesting. Well, right. I mean, I'm saying we should totally have domains that cross over and create the thing. I'm trying to create a smooth circle. Right? In our original list of domains, the natural pairing is adjacent domains. And I just want to create a smooth circle. And for me, in the original domain circle, Kendall, there were 2 points that sticked out. I didn't like the sorcerer rogue were joined by midnight. And I didn't feel like that was a good, joint between them. And then I felt like going from guardian to seraph to wizard was also a was sort of a bumpy ride. Right? Going from druid into ranger into warrior into guardian into seraph actually kind of feels, if assuming that the seraph is basically a paladin, feels kind of smooth, but then going from seraph to wizard, I think is just like a it's like a speed bump. I mean, if you think about the traditional D&D character of paladin, and you think of this heavily armored melee warrior of God, and then the class next to it in the wheel is wizard. It is a very, this studious, robe-wearing, staff-wielding person. It's a big step. It's a big step. Raul, I am a fan and I approve of this stream. Well, thank you so much for the super chat. I'm happy somebody is. Hey, again, this stream was brought to you by the fine folks over there in Europe. I mean, they voted for this or they tipped for this on Thursday, and I said, all right, we'll do another one. All right, you guys have been hanging out here for a while. Let's do it. We are giving away a set of KOLC official, if such a thing exists, KOLC official. Can I find it? No. There we go. I had to find it. Okay, that's not what I clicked. There we go. Also not what I clicked. What is going on? Interesting. Weird. All right, I don't know why that was delayed. All right, so our friends over at Mad Dragon made a set of duality dice, Hope and Fear. They are extra large, extra high contrast, extra large numbers, Hope and Fear colors, but still very readable, still tier 1. Now, of course, we did talk about, maybe making the lettering on the Hope die black, so it would be the maximum amount of contrast. But I just felt like having black lettering on the Hope die, I don't know, it just didn't sit with me right. So we sort of dulled down the orangey or the yellow color of the hope, the gold, and made it a little bit more orangey with some ochre and beige colors just to make it a little bit more higher contrast. But these are really great. They feel great in the hand. They're custom made, handmade, and it's time for you to win a set from our friends at Mad Dragon. All right, let's get a raffle up. Everybody is available, Derek. Sending these overseas is a lot easier and cheaper than sending books. So everybody can enter. Plus, I'm already sending a copy of Daggerheart over to Europe, so why not? Everybody, whatever. I don't give a shit. Unless I literally can't mail it to you, you can enter. I don't give a shit. All right, stop entries, reset the queue. Okay. All right. All right, folks, type !join to join the list. You see your name come up on the screen, you are in the contest. We had a super chat there. From our friend, the self-confessed cynic himself. Are you finally going to do a merch store? No. You still got to join the Patreon, and you still got to do it the old-fashioned way. No. It's because sales tax is such a pain in the ass. I got to collect it, and then I got to report it to everybody, and it's just a terrible thing to collect it, to do all that. It really is a pain in the butt. I'll let this run for a few minutes there while you guys kind of figure that out. So, thank you, Cal.
Cal Daggerheart tipped $3. I sent you an image of how last ebook handles its classes and advanced classes.
All right, cool. Sorry, I'm just reading this here. Okay, yeah, he sent me a. Okay, that's pretty cool. I'll show this when we're done. I don't know about Falconer, but all right, it's interesting. It's a cool looking graphic, Cal. Thank you. All right, Omniscient Toad. Yes. Well, I mean, to be fair, Zen Bullet, I'm not making any money. Mad Dragon is handling all this. I mean, they're the ones selling it and making their money and their dice and stuff like that. Not me. So I don't have to worry about that. Also, that's assuming that people would want to buy our merch. Like maybe if we made cool, funny nerd shirts, maybe. But we'll see. As a reminder, by the way, while we're waiting for everybody to get their final join in, again, remember it's !join to join the giveaway. If you want free stuff, !join, and you can win these dice. These duality dice from Mad Dragon. I mean, my own patrons, okay, some of whom have thousands of tickets. I mean, thousands of tickets, and could have bought several shirts many times over. We produced these shirts 3 years ago, and I still have some left. And we didn't even make that many because my own patrons don't want the shirt. So I can only assume that nobody wants the shirt. Hey, John, what's going on, buddy? A fluffy bullshit time shirt? Yeah. So I was going to do a fluffy bullshit time shirt for Origins this year. We do a custom shirt every year for our Origins meetup, but people didn't want it to say fluffy bullshit time because they didn't want a swear word on it. So that's why we didn't do it. They are not. Well, at this point, luckily, the black ones we are down to just maybe like the last. I think we have like 10 left. I think we have like surprise because I did a bell curve, and I sort of shifted it to the right. So we ordered mostly like larges and extra larges with less mediums and smalls, and maybe only like one extra small or something like that. But I think we're mostly out of like the 2XLs, and I think we're out of the 3XLs. We might have like one 3XL left and like one 4XL, but like we have a fair number of mediums and smalls left, but we didn't get that many as well. Danjman, is there a chance you will put out a book, zine / PDF of these ideas? Oh, Danjman. Does someone from Nice Last Call want to answer that question for him? Now, do I want to? Of course. Will I? Well, Danjamin, it's hard for me to do things, Danjamin. I have some kind of, I don't know what kind of form of ADHD I have, but I have several I have problems focusing on just one thing and getting it done and not being hyper obsessed about like making it perfect. So, it's tough. It is tough. But yes, I mean, that is my dream, is to do it. And I've talked about it before, but what I'd like to do, work with my community as they gain information, as they gain experience with Daggerheart, is to produce a PDF, a monthly or bi-monthly PDF that gave some cool options to people for Daggerheart. Let's say we do it bi-monthly. So after 12 months, we've done 6 issues. Some of it produced by me, all of it, sort of overseen by me. My dream would be to do a 24-page zine, 12 pages of hope, player-facing stuff, 12 pages of fear, GM-facing stuff. Then, at the end of the year, and then people would put it in there, and hopefully, ideally, people in our community would play with it. Not everything is going to be play tested to any extreme. Ideally, people would at least try to play with something in one session at least, because a lot of times, a lot of the problems are really. A lot of times, all you have to do is kick the tires, and you'll pretty much, be able to just figure that out really quickly. Obviously, I, for my own home game and my own home uses, I like to use, Midjourney and other LLMs for art and stuff like that. Obviously, not something I want to do if I'm, making something available for public consumption and but certainly for money. So we would have maybe we'd have some people who make some fun sketches. Maybe we can hire like a black and white line sketch cover art from some artists that I could get connected with through Roll for Combat or something like that. And then maybe some stock art, right? So, because the cost has to be low to me, I don't really even make enough money off this channel to live right now. So, full transparency. The only reason I'm okay right now is because, I'll be honest with you, Daggerheart. Daggerheart has generated so much tips and so much interest for this channel that it's actually allowed me to cover my bills. Not to say that I'd be completely fucked if it wasn't for the Patreon and everything like that. But things are expensive, and I lost a very nice paying, very very, very, very much six-figured data scientist job for YouTube and Patreon. It's a big pay cut. So, anyways, it's not a woe is me story, by the way. It's like I could get my put my resume out there and really try to grind and really try to find a new job, which I'm keeping my options open and I'm still looking, but I wanted to try to do this as a thing and see if I can make it work. But anyways, point is that you say working sucks. Let me tell you something here. YouTube is no slouch either, especially the way I do it, where I'm streaming all the time. And for a lot of people, like for me, it's fun. I like talking about role playing games. For a lot of people, like, Derek, how do you do it? Like, I can't even go live for 30 minutes. Like, you went live for 6 hours for 3 days in a row. But in any case, by producing something for our zine, people hopefully would get a chance to play with it in digital form, and then maybe after 12 months, we've generated 6 issues, right? So we've generated 24 6 issues, right? So we have somewhere like around 144 pages, give or take. Then maybe we've had a chance to do some play testing. We've had a chance to do some fixing. Then we could maybe do like a Kickstarter to try to do a print version of it and put those 6 issues into one book. And we could, with money from the Kickstarter and stretch goals, we could do things like get better art, hire artists, not use stock art, get for some full color pieces or something like that and make it look nice. And then also update and add some additional stuff there, because now the stuff has been being play tested for the last 6 to 12 months. And so it's not just, hey, no one's ever played with this before, but we're going to sell you a book with it. It's, hey, we published this 8 months ago or 9 months ago, and people have really played with this stuff, and we've made some updates and some changes, and we can talk about those. So even if you've already got it through the digital product, you might want to get it for the final version because it'll be updated, or we'd probably call it, we'd probably give you an updated digital version anyways, but now you could own it in print. So there we go. And side note, if we did a print version, naturally one of the things that we would create would probably be new subclasses and new cards. And if we did a Kickstarter, we could have a stretch goal where we could actually get cards and stuff possibly printed. And that way people could actually get physical products for this stuff, which I think would be really, really cool. So, all right, here we go. We're doing the giveaway. Streams Ninja. Good luck, everybody. All right. Philip Legrand, you are our winner. Congrats to Philip. Fantastic. Philip. You are the winner of our first Mad Dragon Dice giveaway. Philip, go ahead and shoot me an email at dmelinda@knightsoflastcall.com. And Philip's been with us a good long time. And send me your mailing address, Philip, and I will, or wherever you want these mailed to, I suppose. And I'll get these out to you. Probably tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday at the latest. But yeah, congrats, Philip. Again, thanks to our folks over at Mad Dragon. Again, I put a link in the doobly-doo below before, but if you go to, if you do want to buy your own, because you don't want to wait to try to win a thing, you can go to, I sent the link in the chat there. I'll put it in the description as well when the stream is over. But this is the Knights of Last Call Hope D12 Hope and Fear die combo. You do not get the dice tray. It does say that dice tray not included, but yeah, it's our first cross promo. So congrats to Philip. They're sold out. Oh no. All right, I'll go yell at Aaron. you gotta get on it. That's awesome. Oh, they're sold out. Damn. I'm sorry. Well, the good news is I have a couple of these, so I'm going to do some more giveaways here in the future. I also still have 2 more copies of Daggerheart, not the limited edition yet, but 2 more copies of Daggerheart that we're also going to be trying to give away as well. So sick. Okay. So, where were we? Well, keep an eye on it. I'll talk to Aaron. I think they're all like kind of handmade. So, I think it's kind of tough, for them to do that. So that's why they might be sold out only because they have like so many orders, because maybe we kind of like gave them a hug of death. So we don't need to necessarily solve this today. But the one thing I want to do is I want to create a circle of 12. And we don't have to solve this today. You know, we got a lot of streams to do this. But, you know, that's one thing. So another thing I talked about earlier, because I do want to touch on a couple other things, is minions. I like the way that minions work in Draw Steel for only one way better than Daggerheart. Because they stole, or I should say, they acknowledged in Daggerheart that they took the rules from Flee Mortals, which I really liked. Oh, you want to see the image that person sent me? Sure. That is not the image that person sent me. What did Cal send me? Open image. Open link. No, that's not it. It's a WebP. Why is it doing that? Why is this being such a pain in the butt? It's like a weird. I don't know what's going on with this. It's like wanting me to save it. Okay, well, whatever. That was weird. It's like a WebP, and like it won't open in my browser. Okay. So this was what they sent me for another game. So you have your base classes of Mage, Primalist, Acolyte, Rogue, Sentinel. I don't even know what game this is. And then that Mage can become a Rune Master, a Spellblade, a Sorcerer. The Primalist can become a Shaman, a Beastmaster, a Druid. The Acolyte can become a Lich, Necromancer, or Warlock. The Rogue can become a Blade Dancer, a Marksman, or a Falconer. And the Sentinel can become a Paladin, a Void Knight, and a Forge Guard. Kind of reminds me of the EverQuest 2. In EverQuest 2, originally, you start off as an adventurer. Everyone started as a level 1 adventurer. And then, like, at level 5 or something, you were either, like, a rogue, a warrior, an initiate, or like a mage or something like that. And then at, like, level 10, you became, like, something else. And then at, like, level 20, you became something else. Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting, there's some interesting ideas here. I mean, it's interesting that they don't really have, like, a warrior, right? Unless, like, the Forge Guard is supposed to be, like, the warrior, I guess. Sometimes I think the problem with some of these systems, though, that have, like, the base class to the advanced class is I've seen people play these type of games and go, I don't want to be a marksman or a blade dancer or a falconer. I just want to be a rogue. Like, why are you making me stop being a rogue? I don't know how this action RPG, works, but I have seen that effect before. So in Flee Mortals, they basically created this situation here where you have minions. They have 1 hit point, and if you hit a minion, they die. But if you do enough damage, you might kill that minion and additional minions. That is totally great. That's a great rule. Flee Mortals, A+, big fan. I like it a lot. What I don't like is where we have the minion rule in this game. Now, you're spending a fear in order to activate all the minions. This is a little problematic because, like, you're never going to activate minions one at a time. I feel like even in a game that isn't about like making things difficult, I just feel like activating your minions one at a time is just something that's just never going to happen. But the biggest problem I have here is it spotlights choose a target and spotlight all adversaries within a certain range of them. Those minions move into melee range of the target and make one shared attack roll. On a success, they deal X damage each. Combine this damage. The only problem I have with this minion rule in Daggerheart, I do actually have a problem with this. It works, but again, what I would do differently in Daggerheart, to use Jess's language, I like when minions feel like they are spread out. And that, yes, they are ganging up on people, but they are all over the place. This minion rule makes it so that minions feel very like they're literally only attacking one person and that they are only a problem for one person. And that, to me, kind of defeats the purpose and point of the minion. And I don't necessarily know that I like this rule. Now, what Draw Steel did, they used the 13th Age minion rule, which has its own problems, where you have this combined shared hit point pool, which I don't necessarily love. But what I do like what they did is that when you activate a minion group, they all go. Now, basically, there's no point in having more than 3 minions against one person at a time. But basically, if you had 9 minions, you could put 3 on one PC, 3 on one PC, 3 on one PC. You make one die roll, and you go with that. Or, now, of course, the advantage there is, of course, everybody in Draw Steel attacks and hits. Because the other problem is minions tend to have very low attack bonuses, as well they should. But the problem is when they make the group attack, they don't get an increase to their attack bonus. And even when you combine the damage, it's not that high because the minion's damage is very low. So when you're spending a fear to make a very, I think, unthematic, but also not very powerful or potent attack. And so I find it to be both problematic from the fiction, but I also think it's problematic from the mechanics. So in Daggerheart, I would do differently. Now, I also don't want, I think that they should be dangerous and feel different. But I just don't, so I don't want it to be like, oh, each minion, if you have 10 minions, you're auto hit and you take 1 trillion damage. Now minions are the most dangerous thing in the entire game. No, I don't want that either. But I think there's a way to make this a better rule. I don't necessarily know that I have an exact rule for it, but what Draw Steel did, I think, is at least a start, which is the idea that if I'm going to do this group attack option and I'm going to make it spend a fear, I want to be able to activate a lot of minions and I want to be able to have them sort of impact the entire battlefield and really kind of describe it as like a mass scene of chaos and things happening and breaking through and kind of destroying things. So that's one kind of GM facing rule that I would change. That I would change for sure. Another thing, this is more generic in Daggerheart. I think the magic items are kind of boring. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the game, and we have to figure out a difference, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, but what I would do with magic items is, because here's the problem. The problem with any game that has magic items, it's a problem of cognitive load. It's a problem of compounding abilities. You have A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G plus H, and now you're broken. Okay? My solution is I want magic items to use the loadout. Normally, in the game, you are restricted mechanically to getting domain cards from your 2 domains, 3 if you multiclass. Magic items provide us with a way to essentially give you new domain cards that you add to your vault or have access to. And if you want to use that magic item's sort of active or cool ability, you can put it in your vault. Your loadout. And this is good because now we don't have to worry about the power scaling problem. Because what magical items do is they give you more options, and those options could be valuable, but they don't necessarily make you escalatingly and exponentiatingly more powerful, which is the problem that most magical items do, right? Magic item A makes magic items B stronger than A or B would be on their own, right? They buoy against each other. Now, there might still be instances, there should be instances for people to be able to do that. And I also think that there is a place for what I would call the simple, basic magic item, right? Where you have it, you equip it, and maybe, essentially it does something in your vault and you never have to worry about it, okay? There is a world for just having a passive item, well, I mean, Derek, magic items already in the game can be used by everyone anyways. So by that definition, are they already watered down? I mean, everybody can use anything anyways. So, I just think that you have these cards, and I would just lean into them. It's kind of what it comes down to. And I think having magic items use and take up card slots gives you a cool way to make an item powerful without making it feel like it's giving somebody 5 new abilities. And now in a game where everybody else is limited to 5 active abilities or powers or spells in their loadout, somebody with a magic item now has 8. No, that person, if they want that magic item to do the really cool, special, powerful, amazing things, then put it in there. Then put it in there. Put it in their loadout, and they have to pay the price. That's the gamist conceit, just so that everybody just is somewhat limited. But it also has a real advantage, which is I played 4th edition several times at high level, and it was really, really ridiculous because your characters had 15 or more. Was 3, 4, 12, 11. No, your character probably had like 22 powers from your class. But then you also had another like 15 to 20 powers from your magic items. It's like you had like 40 cards all in front of you. And I think that's too much. Now, granted, you're always going to have access to the vault and to things like that. But I think that, you can get around that to a certain extent by just saying like either maybe they have a really high stress cost, or the fact that for a lot of players who can handle the complexity, they might be looking at their vault while they're playing. But for a lot of people, they're just going to take what they have in their loadout and they're going to focus on that. So can you give an example of a powerful magical item? Okay, simple. Let's say I want to make, one of the classic swords of classic D&D was the Flame Tongue. It's nowadays we just think of like, oh, throw a flaming rune on it, or it's a flaming sword. But used to be back in D&D, there used to be the flaming sword. It was called the Flame Tongue. Flaming wasn't just some random elemental rune that got slapped onto any old magical item. There was one flaming sword in D&D. It was called the Flame Tongue. It gave you this, kind of grab bag of powers. And so if I'm going to make a cool flaming sword that works kind of like a fiery lightsaber, and it can do fire damage and maybe can launch a fireball across the battlefield, and maybe I can sweep my sword and a wave or wake of fire shoots out around me, or like a cone burst or something like that. If I want to do all these cool things with this sword, those start to sound like powers and spells and abilities. And if I just give that Flame Tongue to somebody, and now those powers are stacking on top of the 5 powers that they already have, now we start to, we get into this problem of scope creep. Whereas if I said, hey, you gain the Flame Tongue, and the Flame Tongue magical item comes, maybe this is a really cool card. Maybe this is what makes it a mythical card, is it comes with like 3 cards that get put into your vault. And you're like, cool. Like, if I want to be the Flame Tongue guy, if I want to have all 3 of those powers, I have to give something up. And, I'm okay with that. Now, again, there's a certain type of simulations, people who want to fill out the paper doll, right? And have World of Warcraft and have all this other stuff. But I'll tell you this, most of the time in those games, those abilities are just like really boring passive stuff. You get plus 2%, plus 2% to fire resist, you know, plus 25 to vitality, plus 72 to strength, right? It's just background shit, you know. It's not really exciting or interesting to use. I think if you do gain an item like that, like I said, it's kind of like a set it and forget it type thing, you know. And yeah, I definitely want to avoid the sort of magic arms and armor race, right? Where it's like, well, you have to have this rune or, you know, it just doesn't work anymore. From a certain point of view, I think it's totally fine, but I also think it just kills the quality of coolness and imagination that comes with having that kind of item. You know, it was almost like a rite of passage. I think magic items should either be like almost not magical, just like trivial or in the background, or be really cool. I think things that are in between are the worst. So that's kind of how I feel. So that's something I would change for magic items. I've also talked a lot about environments. I think they're really cool, and I think I would lean more into them. I would create more and different types of environments, or maybe sub-types of environments. I think you could use those to do dungeon crawls and hex crawls. I've also talked at length about how the existing environment types, as written in the book, and I apologize for not using the SRD. Don't kill me, Darrington. The existing environment types in the book are explorations, traversals, events, and socials. And again, I think you could add either item. I think you could add elements to this list, but I think you could also add like parentheses and have subtypes. But I would love to see some of the classes interact with these types. I've talked before about how I think it'd be cool to have the Ranger class, or certainly at least the one subclass, be really good at interacting with, say, the traversals and explorations environments. One environment type that I thought would be kind of interesting would be called like a journey or a journeys environment. So, well, traversals are typically, I think they're written mostly in the book as like, you know, there's kind of an overlap between that, but I like the idea of like traversals being like, you know, you need to climb this cliff, you need to cross this bridge, right? Traversals are very discrete. Journey environments would be more like the vast desert, like the ancient forest, the ancient wood, and have it be like more of like a montage, long, distance thing. So anyways, I like the idea of a class like the Ranger, which is really good at, traversals, exploration, maybe these journeys, and then someone like the Rogue, or maybe even the Bard or subclass, who are better at things like a social event or an event, a social environment or an event environment, depending on what the situation is. The event environment itself is a little bit wonky, but certainly the social exploration or social environment, and have mechanics, class mechanics, even potentially domain cards that kind of, link into that. Well, actually, Ira, kind of my idea of like tiering and like fractaling, if we use the Fate fractal, the way that the environments list, come on, PDF, I believe in you. The way that environments list things like potential adversaries, right? You could have a journey environment that could list potential traversals and potential explorations, right? Like that, and potential adversaries potentially, but as well, but like kind of have like it be like kind of a self-referring, a self-referential, sort of environment, which is fine. But overall, I really like the adversaries. I will say that it's not really a problem. It's just the way that I run the game. It's kind of a problem. So this is not a problem. It's just kind of a problem the way that I run the game, which is some monsters in the game some adversaries in the game are slow, which means that you basically have to spotlight it first. Oh, that's ramp up. What's the other one? It's actually, what's it called? Slow? Is it called slow? Are there no slow creatures in this game? I thought it was called slow. Okay, here we go. Basically, it requires you to spotlight the enemy first before you spotlight it again. The thing is I kind of already do this all the time anyways, and so it's kind of pointless to me, because I kind of already do this, just because of the way that I play. So this is one of more of these, like, this is a problem specifically for Derek and the way that Derek does his sort of like soft moves and sort of hints at what an enemy is doing. But I do agree with Ludo, which is that a lot of the adversary abilities feel like advice for the GMs, like slow and relentless. Like, as Derek, if Green Ooze didn't have that passive ability, I promise you, I would never, just out of nowhere, activate an ooze and have it like rush across the battlefield and go and attack someone. No, I would use a soft move where I would show signs of an approaching danger, and I would describe how the green ooze is beginning to undulate and ripple and flow across the battlefield, undeterred by the rocks and the rubble and the debris, and it seems to have locked on, quivering with anticipation as it start to mound, flow towards you, a mound of quivering green flesh. What do you do? And I'm basically hinting that, hey, this thing's coming for you. You have a time to do something. But I would do that with other I would do that with other creatures as well, especially if it felt right in the situation. If it was like a lightning quick little rat creature, yeah, it might dart out from behind a rock and stab you and then dart back. But if it's like a big lumbering, creature or demon or ogre, I'm much more likely to use these sort of soft moves that then turn into golden opportunities, in that respect. So that's one minor thing that I would change here. I don't really have a good. This is, again, it's all a vibe. What would Derek change in Daggerheart? I don't know. Well, we've talked about this. I don't know that I would actually do this. I don't know that I would actually do this because it's difficult to get right. But let me see if I can find my Scaladraw. There we go. Okay, delete that. But what I would, I've talked about this before. I know it's a little wonky, and I'd have to do a lot of math, and I don't even know if it really makes sense or if I should do it anyways. But in the core game, right, PCs roll 2d12 for action rolls, right? Duality. Nice. But they also roll 2d12 for reactions, which are not duality dice. They are just 2d12. I know why they did this, because it's very simple and it makes a lot of sense. But I don't like it. I think reactions should just be a d20. And the reason I think reaction should be a d20 is because, for starters, I've talked about this before. I've talked about the genius of the reaction roll. The problem in PBTA is that anytime you want somebody to make a roll, it's a PBTA roll, and that means that it could have success with complication, and that means you need to come up with a million different things. The reaction roll is great. And as a result of it, you can ask a player to essentially make a saving throw. And as a result of it, they won't. You don't have to worry about moves spiraling. You don't have to worry about creating fear and failure and hope and all this other stuff. The problem I have with the 2d12 for the reaction is, and I haven't gotten enough reps with Daggerheart to know this yet, is it's going to feel like you're making an action roll. And it's not an action roll. 2d12 rolls generate hope and fear. Full stop. The GM rolls d20. Why? Because the GM doesn't roll hope or fear. Hey, make a reaction roll. Why? Because this roll doesn't generate hope and fear. Also, it's a very minor thing. Rolling a d20 is faster than rolling 2d12. Adding 2d12 is slower than just rolling a d20. So reaction rolls should be the fastest possible thing that we can generate. So roll d20, add a number. Stand by with your reaction roll. It should feel different. When you're being proactive, when you're taking control of the situation, you're rolling 2d12. When you're reacting, you're rolling a d20. Now, things are more chaotic. They're more, 2d12 is a bell curve. It's almost like you kind of have a sort of an advantage. No, Cal, as I said before, nothing is wrong with this game. It's not an issue in the slightest. It's not a problem whatsoever. Also, Cal, not to make too fine of a point on it, were you playing in person or were you playing online? Nothing I am suggesting would make the game better for anybody in any stretch of the imagination. I think if you're playing on a VTT, a lot of these things don't matter. Or just even playing online automatically. For me, I like that the D20 is more variable. I like that the reaction roll feels riskier than the more reliable action roll. This is something that I think is really interesting to me as a GM. And as a player too, because it means that my players have more certainty that the stuff they're going to do is going to work. But it means that when stuff happens to them, it's kind of anybody's fucking guess. And I think that feels a little bit better to me. Again, some of this is based entirely just on my feeling and my vibes. So I like the idea that the reaction roll is a D20 because, number one, it avoids any sort of bias towards this is a hope or a fear roll. It's fast to resolve. And it avoids anyone thinking that there's hope or there's fear or there's any of this. Now you would absolutely have to tweak some of the numbers and all of this stuff. It may not even be tenable given the structure of the game. I just know that we already have one person who rolls a D20, the GM. And I like the idea that, because like a lot of people, well, why does the DM roll a D20 and the players roll 2D12? Some people have a problem with that. I've seen people say that. Well, I think it should be more of a question of the duality roll is 2D12. And duality rolls are used to generate hope and fear. If the roll doesn't generate hope and fear, aka a reaction or the GM making an attack roll, then we can use D20. And now granted, I agree. Is that more complicated for the player? Sure. I think it is. And is that juice worth that squeeze? I don't know. Maybe not. But then also people get to, they get to use their favorite D20 more. And maybe that's also a win for people who really like the D20. So that's a change that I would consider making. I'm not entirely sure if I would do this, but I am tempted because I hate rolling dice. Is I would then make the player defending with their evasion a reaction, which then would mean that the player would roll the D20 and only the player would roll. That is very much a Derek bias. Now, to be clear, the GM would roll one thing, which would be, the GM would roll. And I think it's important for the GM to roll. The GM would roll damage. And the way it would work, the play order, as I envision it, would be, I, the GM, would activate my monster. What do I always use? The ogre? Yeah, the ogre. Okay. And I'd grab my ogre's, 3d10, and I would say, the ogre stomps over to you. And I'd roll this in front of the group, in a dice tray or something like that. We'll say, make it easy because I have d12s here. The ogre rolls 3d12. The ogre smashes through, comes over, and then I would roll my dice. And I'd say, and he brings his massive club smashing down for 19 damage. So now I have spoken. This is getting into some really deep player psychology things, and one of the reasons why I think Blades in the Dark works really well. I have spoken the badness into existence. I have rolled the dice. It is 19 damage. A player can look at their character sheet and already make an assessment of how bad that 19 damage is going to be for them. And that can really help flavor them in terms of, especially if there's abilities that now work off of them making this reaction roll. The player will then decide and describe how they are evading this roll. And it starts to feel more like a resistance roll, sort of, from Blades in the Dark. And it actually starts to feel more like the player is taking control of the narrative and dodging out of the way of this 19 damage attack. And they know how much is on the line. Because even in the fiction, let's say 19 damage is a huge hit. I know it's a severe wound, right? So it becomes this really big, scary thing. On the other hand, if I roll really low and I just say, it's a quick thrust that quickly comes for you, the player knows that there's only one hit point of damage at stake. That's not to say that they're still going to make an evasion roll, but they get to do that for free. They don't have to make a decision to not to do that. But let's say there were resources that a player could now use with their reaction roll to help them, make miss, right? Like a shield or something like that. They can use that a little bit more strategically and tactically. And I think it'll fit the fiction a little bit better. So I like the idea as the GM of rolling the damage first while I'm making my description, using the results of that damage roll to actually kind of do a little bit of a foreshadow of how bad the attack is. And then the player, through their evasion roll, is kind of like doing a Blades in the Dark style resistance roll, where they're basically saying, no, I don't get hit in the face. I do this instead. And I make this really cool evasion, and I block, and I jump or, get out of the way or deflect it or parry it or do whatever. And especially if you have levers and resources that the player can spend in order to help or modify their evasion roll, and speaking that into existence, I think becomes really, really cool and really powerful. And so while I do not like the GM rolling dice, I actually don't mind the GM rolling damage dice in this particular instance. Because the only other option would be that the damage is flat, is constant, which you could do. But I think that kind of runs counter-purpose to the damage threshold system. And then because they'll know it's always going to be a one hit point hit, and they don't really have to worry about it.
Edward tipped $5. Preach.
Just preach. So much. So this you're getting a look into why I make changes. Thank you, Edward. You're getting a look into why I make changes in a game, and this might be very different from the reason why you have historically made house rules or house changes in a game. So much of the reason I make changes to a game has to do with the feel, the play patterns that emerge, the elegance or awkwardness of an exchange of information, of gaming resources. Does the mechanical flow of the game match the feeling and the tone that the mechanic is supporting? I think that that's a really, really cool thing. And I've done this, and the reason I know this works is because this is how I run Dungeon World, right? When if I'm running up with my monster in Dungeon World, right? Where's my Dungeon World? Dungeon World. If I'm running at you and I'm making my move, I'll say something like, the purple worm rises up, opening up its many-toothed maw. A 3-part mouth springs open, and I roll D10 plus 5 damage, and I roll 11 damage. And I go, and it comes smashing down at you for 11 damage. What do you do? And then the player, because in PBTA all the roles are player facing, the player will then describe how they are defying danger. Maybe they're raising their shield to block, and then maybe I say, well, that's a terrible idea. Maybe they're dodging out of the way, but they know what danger has been spoken into existence. They're making an informed decision about that. So I do like that. Steven. There's a rule in Knave 2nd Edition where players make all rolls. I ran a game this way, and the players didn't even realize it until I mentioned it after the game. That's awesome. That's awesome that they didn't notice. They were just like, oh, wow, that actually felt completely natural, and we didn't even think about that. And so Zipper gets what I'm talking about here. Game feel is it's very much a real thing, and it's really hard to get right. And yeah, and again, I think that's awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of doing that, and I like doing that. But the problem is, that's why I like giving the player the evasion roll, because if I roll the damage first, then I make my attack, it feels weird because it doesn't feel like there's as much of a back and forth. I don't know. It's a weird. It's a feeling thing. It's not really a mechanical thing. It really is. Because fundamentally, it really doesn't make much of a difference, right? It's still just a D20 random roll, or even if you're using 2D12, it's still kind of all balanced in that respect. So I kind of like that. So that's a change I would make. And of course, we would be remiss if I didn't mention this, of course. Everybody knows this, so I didn't really mention it at the beginning. But, I think it'd be cool to have 12 domains and 12 core classes, that sort of core ethos. But, by the way, D&D has 12 classes. Pathfinder 2 has 12. There's something to be said about 12 classes. And, of course, the most egregious thing here, it would be my game would go to level 12. My game would go to level 12. Tier 1 would be levels 1, 2, 3. Tier 2 would be levels 4 through 6. Tier 3 would be levels 7 to 9. And Tier 4 would be levels 10 through 12. 4 tiers, each 3 levels long, and that way you can sort of structure each of these as an arc or like a movie in an ongoing trilogy. Each tier will have the same amount of narrative weight. You can kind of break it down that way and have a cool effect. You'll get to experience within each tier the sort of gradual power up, because remember, the monsters don't change within the tier, but your character does get slightly better as you go through a tier. You get a little bit higher damage threshold. You get some additional cards and abilities. You get some more advancements. So by the time you reach the 3rd level in a tier, you are stronger, reasonably so, than you were at the beginning of the tier. I'm a big believer, I've talked about this before, the rule of 3 when I talk about monsters, the idea that it's really cool to fight a monster 3 times. You fight it the first time, you have no idea what it can do, you're kind of outmatched, you're outclassed, and maybe it kicks your butt a little bit. You win, but it's rough. You fight it a second time, now you have a better idea of what it's doing, so you're not surprised, and you're able to start formulating better strategies. But then it's important, so now you've figured it out, but it's important to have that 3rd fight with the monster where you can now demonstrate your mastery over the monster. I want it to be sort of an easy fight because you now know what to do, you have a strategy, it works well, the fight's a lot easier to handle. Same thing's true with the tier. I like the idea of going through the tiers, 1, 2, and 3. You're fighting level tier 1 monsters, and they start off, they're kind of tough. By the time you get to level 3, the tier 1 monsters are no longer a threat. Additionally, this gives us a great segue into the next tier. What a great way, what a cool way to sort of highlight the dangers that the players are about to fight than by throwing a tier 2 monster at the party as they reach the end of the tier, which is going to be, a big jump up and a big tough increase. And that's hard to do in the current game because of the just drastic power difference between tier 1 and tier 2, which is only over 1 level difference. The other thing that I like about for Daggerheart is that the current game, by going the level range that it does, it only gives us the ability to multi-class at tier 3, which in the core game is 5. which means you are halfway through the game before you've even gotten to multiclass. I like the idea that you can't multiclass right away. I like that. I think waiting till level 5 halfway through the game is too much. Under this system, you would multiclass at tier 2, not tier 3, which would be level 4, which would only be a third of the way through the game. So I think that's a more reasonable amount. Thirdly, fourthly, wherever we're at, most of the monsters that should be made for this game should be made for tier 1, because that's when most people are going to play. They're going to play at the beginning of the game. The problem with the way the current game is written, you only play tier 1 for one level, and then you're tier 2, and all of those monsters and all of those environments are now not really useful. I mean, you can use them. There's rules for using them in the game, but the game is pretty strongly based and predicated around the idea that when you're tier 2, you're fighting tier 2 monsters. When you're tier 1, you're fighting tier 1 monsters. You know, it's not as egregious as like some of the games where it's like when you're level 7, everything in the world around you is level 7. All the monsters are level 7. This is a whole tier, a whole region. I don't have that need, for me personally, or for my vision of a game, of having that sort of like, we play one session and everybody levels up to 3. I guess is like, that's like a D&D thing, right? Because they want you to pick your subclass or whatever. I understand that that's the way a lot of people play D&D. They level up to 3 at the end of the first session, or they even start at level 3. I don't know why they made that decision. Other than that, they had 10 levels and they wanted it to be 4 tiers. I don't know, but to me, it's strange. It's just a strange choice. So I'm not going to say it's a bad choice. I'm not going to say it's a wrong choice. I like the idea that each tier is the same level of monsters. Additionally, this also lets you, as a GM, really set the tone for your game. For example, if we played a tier 1 campaign, it would be, number 1, lower power level. Cool. Number 2, at the level 1, you would start off with, at level 1, you would start off with your 2 level 1 cards. Then, at level 2, you would gain another card. And then at level 3, you would gain a 4th card. And potentially, if you used one of your advancements at level 2 or level 3 to picking up an additional domain card, you would have a 5th card. And that means that through level tier 1, unless you're a School of Knowledge War Wizard or School of Knowledge Wizard, which is fine because that's a specific class and that actually feels like it fits the fantasy, tier 1 characters will never use the vault. I like being able to say, tier 1, you could go an entire campaign of low-level Daggerheart and never have to worry about vault management. All of your abilities will fit in your loadout. That's cool to me. Vault management doesn't really kick in until you get to level 2 or until you get to tier 2. I like that. That's cool to me. So that's another reason I like the idea of these tiers, because then I can you can set the structure and tone of your game. And lastly, this should surprise no one. I think the subclasses are cool, a lot. In the current game, which I will write here, I guess. Give me this. So this is the current game. Tier 1 is 1. Tier 2 is 2 to 4. Tier 3 is 5 to 7. And Tier 4 is 8 to 10. Okay? Here's the problem I have. Well, here's one of the not problems. Here's how I would do things differently in my game. You get, at Tier 1, you pick your subclass. And you get your No, don't do that to me, you son of a bitch. Well, then why did you do that? That's stupid. All right. Minus points to Excalibur. You get your foundation. Why did it do that? Why? No, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. Why did you do that? Is that my fault? Yeah, okay, it was my fault. All right. Tier 1, 1. Tier 2, 2 to 4. Tier 3, 5 to 7. Tier 4, 8 to 10. Okay, so at Tier 1, you get your subclass. Cool, I'm a subclass. You get your foundation feature. Cool. And then you don't get another upgrade to your subclass until level 5, if you take it. So I don't like that you have to wait like half the game to get your next upgrade on your subclass. I like the idea of doing something like you get your foundation, but then you get your, move this, but then there could be an upgrade at 4. We could still call that specialist or specialization. And then we can give you an expert ability. And then we can give you your mastery ability. So we would add a new tier to every single subclass. Yes, I know. But you know, I want these mastery abilities to feel powerful, you know? And I think there's some sort of a natural psychological resonance. Even though the game goes to 12 in my version, the fact that tier 4 kicks in at 10 and that the mastery power would be ideally very powerful. I think being at 10, 11, 12, even though the game is codified to go to 12, would feel like being epic level. Like that the normal game is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, you know? And you're in that epic zone with a powerful set of features and abilities and arrays and all this other stuff. And I just feel like, you know, this is just a better way to spread that out a little bit and give the game a little bit more room to breathe. We have long debated on this channel about 10 levels versus 20 levels, and people like Self-Confessed Cynic are like 10 levels isn't enough. And part of me almost kind of says, yeah, I kind of agree. I sometimes say, I think, you know, 13 to 15 levels might be perfect. I do think 20 levels is too long. So if 13 to 15 would be perfect for me, 12 ain't bad. You know, it's pretty close to what I think is a really good value. And it means that you have a lot of great options. It means that a lot of players, you know, you could tell your players ahead of time, hey, we're going to play a tier 1, tier 2 campaign. That's 6 levels. You're going to get these features. You're going to get these abilities. And I think that's cool. I just I don't like this gap in the specialization thing, because I think a lot of people are going to play Daggerheart, and realistically, they're never going to get to tier 3. They're not going to get to level 5. They're going to play level 1. They're going to get to level 2, 3, maybe 4, and then I don't know if they're going to get to 5. And so you'll never get like the next part of your you'll never get to the next part of your class feature. You'll never get to the next part of your subclass. You'll never get to multiclassing. So I like the idea of splitting up the game a little bit more and allowing specialization to occur at tier 2. Along with multiclassing as, you know, an option along the way. So that's one idea as well. Yeah, sure. Pacing is a thing too. Also, right? I'm getting this is me also thinking about like dagger reaches, right? 1 year, 12 months, 12 levels, 1 tier per season. Oh, I'm just saying, 1 year, 12 months, 12 levels, 1 tier per season. Let's go. Right? It just fits, right? You could just knock out an entire Daggerheart campaign, right? You know, if you play 4 times a month, that's 4 sessions a level. Maybe you only play twice a month. Your campaign's a little bit more aggressive. You level up every 2 sessions. I think most people would agree that leveling up every 2 to 4 sessions feels about right, or at least that's kind of some of the default logic. Although I don't know what people do nowadays. People are crazy. They're like, oh, we've been playing this campaign for 17 years and we've only leveled up twice. And I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? 12's just great. 12's great. So that requires a lot of rethinking and a lot of rejiggering. Well said, Danjamin. I'm getting way too many good or bad ideas from the stream. I wasn't being flippant when I said, "Hey, let's ruin the game." Right? I mean, this shakes things up. I'm not saying that these things make the game better. I'm really not. They're just things that feel right to me. You know, is how I would describe it for sure. Thank you, Danjamin. I appreciate it. Believe it or not, I don't really have a whole lot to say about ancestries or communities. I think the way that they're written is really great. I love them adding the sort of parallel complexity with things like the transformation cards. I think those are great. A great way to expand the game. I talked about magic items. I talked about wounds instead of HP. I kind of talked about this in my 12 steps, 12 lessons. This is very vague, so I'm almost hesitant to talk about it, but I like some kind of integration of Fabula Ultima Fate where your core identity and motivations impacts things mechanically. I don't know that I want to get to the point where, you can do something against yourself to earn a hope point. I don't think we would go that route, where you have like the full fate, aspect and you're invoking your aspect or you're being compelled. I don't think I want to go that route with this game. I don't think that's where this game needs to exist. But I do think that there's something there as well. Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Zipperfist. I think the answer is the leveling should depend on the campaign frame. And we've seen even in the book that they've kind of basically said that. Every game essentially is milestone leveling. It just depends on what that milestone is. Is it once you get a certain amount of treasure, then you level up? That's the way AD&D first edition worked, right? Is it after you kill a certain number of monsters, then you level up? That's the way 5th edition and 4th edition D&D work, technically. So everything is milestone level. You just need to decide. Now, I said the only milestone level I don't agree with is the milestones that are invisible. I don't like invisible milestone leveling. The whole idea of a milestone is, milestones are supposed to give you a sense of progression of, we're getting closer to our, journey, our goal, right? That's what they mean in project management. It's what they literally mean alongside of roads. You're like, oh, look, I'm getting closer to my destination. The milestone is helping me indicate that. If the milestones are hidden and invisible and it's random and it's biased and you have no idea when you're going to level up, it's not a fucking milestone. So by definition, though, that isn't milestone leveling up. So as long as you have something that you can say to the players, this is you making progress toward your goal. These are your milestones, and if you achieve them, you will achieve the next level. Then that's fine. And I think you can do things like what they do in the Colossus of the Drylands, where they say the milestones is taking out Colossi. You take out a Colossi, that's you level up. Yeah. Lol, FBT, aka GM says so milestone. It's always best when the DM goes, you might not survive the next fight if I don't let you level up. If someone has ever said that to you, Zipperfist, I apologize on behalf of dungeon masters and game masters everywhere, because that's horrible and terrible. Let's see. In terms of like domains, I like Valor a lot. I like Blade mostly. The Bone name is weird, but I still think Bone's fine. Again, I would rework Sage to be this primal domain. I would rework Arcana to be this elemental domain. I actually like the Midnight domain. I like the Grace domain. I like the Codex domain, although, like I said, I would move some of the damage dealing stuff over to elemental. That's not to say that Chaos Codex shouldn't have any fireballs or things like that, but I just think that it should be reworked a little bit so that it makes more sense between Wizard and Bard. I do think the Splendor domain is my least favorite domain. I do think that there's something to be said about that as well. Also, while we're here, I do think I would create some kind of ritual system. Even Cosmere did it, basically. I don't need for these powers to be... I don't need these abilities to be kind of codified in that way. So... Splendor has like a couple of spells like that, which I don't like. So yeah, I I mean, that's. I would say. I mean, there's some fundamental reworks I would do there. Most of the adversaries I think are pretty good. The ritual system, the way ritual system works in Cosmere, Enrique, is the magic basically works a certain way. It just works, and then it's tied then to a new skill that you get access to, and to use that magic, you make skill checks basically, and the GM will decide the DC of what you're trying to do as long as that magical effect falls within the criteria of what that magical school is capable of doing. And so in that respect, magic is just like a skill because, you know, it's a very hard magic system that you can utilize and, you know, using the normal situation of setting a DC and using the magic skill to sort of make that effect come true. It doesn't try to sit there and literally codify all of the minutia that skill can do. It paints a very broad brush and then says, well, look, this magic allows you to stick things to other things, right? You can adhere objects to other objects. What could that accomplish? I don't know. I'm not going to give you a master list, and I'm not going to say, oh, well, you didn't take the boots to ground, you know, power, so you can't stick boots to ground. It just says, nope, that's what the magic does, and you can apply it in a very, dare I say, scientific way. Now, there are ways that it can be expanded. You can increase the range. You might be able to make it cost less, you know, stress or resources. You might even be able to affect flesh, which normally you can't do. But you can see how that's a different way of approaching it rather than codifying every single effect, which could potentially lead to people having, like, you know, bitch out issues. Oh, it can't do that. Yes, it can. No, it can. No, it can. I don't think it would work. But, you know, that's the price we pay. I personally think Fabula Ultima has figured out a really great balance, which is says, look, the repeatable mechanical effects that you're going to use a lot, especially in combat, we're going to make those into powers and abilities, and we're going to stick those on cards or, you know, give them to you in your character sheet, and you're going to use them. For the random type stuff, you know, let's just figure it out and use the cool system that we have in place, you know? So, plus, you're already playing a game that has access to things like hope and stress and other resources, and so it's easy to tax those resources and make it so that, you know, casters can do that kind of stuff. And I think that's pretty cool. Now, I will say that, you know, potentially there's different ways that you could structure it. Does having access to a ritual magic use a card in your loadout? Does it use up some of your space? Because if it doesn't, then you're kind of getting that ability for free, and that's a lot of flexibility for free. And even if it has a high cost, you don't have to spend the cost, so gaining it is only an advantage to you. So you do have to, you know, be mindful to a certain extent of certain balance issues. But again, Daggerheart isn't first and foremost a game ultimately about balance. You know, in most fiction, the wizard type character is still way more powerful than the fighter type character with a sword. Even in movies, it's usually the case. But most people still consider the guy with the sword the lead, you know, the main character, because, you know, they're the leader. They're the one. They're the cool character, and they still do cool things just because they have access to. They can't do all the amazing tricks and stuff like that. But that's because D&D is a game about beating the game. You know. Absolutely, Enrique. Yeah, absolutely. Enrique said, so you're going to exclude cards like Final Words so it would fall in the ritual system. You'd have to make up new cards. I mean, you have to make up new cards anyways, Enrique. We didn't get into the details of that, but there are some domain powers that I think are, we could do better. You know, like I don't think that they're particularly inspired or interesting, or they don't scale in a way that I think makes them compelling, and, you know, things like that, you know, so, but yeah, something like that I think we could do. So yeah, I would, some of it is just for me, you know, maybe some OCD-ness of wanting to have this cool idea of like 12 and 12 and 12 and 12. Some of it is changing up things like the Druid very radically, and, you know, maybe adding some additional domains, changing up the order of some of the way we roll dice. Fundamentally, though, from like a character sheet perspective, does this have a character sheet in it? I can never remember. No, I don't have any problems with I don't have any problems with the ancestries, really. I mean, I think people have already started creating cool new ancestries, cool new communities, and I think those are all those all look great to me. For some odd reason, when I do a search for Daggerheart, I get the Void. I don't know why I can never find the character sheet on my thing. It must have some horrible name that is nothing like what it should be. Oh, okay, that's why it doesn't have the word. It's called Character Sheets Daggerheart May. Weird. Okay. Very strange. Okay. So yeah, let's see. I like the stats that we have. I like that strength that we've gotten rid of con. I like splitting agility and finesse. I love the armor system. I love the threshold system. I like hope. It's not a whole lot I would change there. I like proficiency. I like the limited list of weapons. I think we don't need 27 maces and 45, bows. I think we can have some generic stuff that's pretty good. The armor is pretty basic and boring, but that's okay. It's armor. We get that through the armor slots, and I think there's enough play there. It doesn't need to be too much deeper than that. Some people have really complained about the gold system. I think it's completely fine, especially for this game. I wouldn't change much there. Again, this is looking at the bard, but when we go to level 12, we would have to think about what tier 1 upgrades would look like. Clearly, you can't boost your proficiency and boost your other stuff. There's some other stuff there that we'd have to change so that it would affect some of the math of the game. But there's not too much there. Bard, I'm not going to get into the subclasses, but I like the Bard's rally feature. I think their hope feature is okay. I don't give it like an A+. I give it not because this has nothing to do with it being powerful. It's actually, I think, really powerful. But I don't know. It doesn't grab me the way that I want it to. Druid, we've talked about ad nauseum. Guardian, I love their feature. I love their hope ability. And in fact, the thing I like about the unstoppable ability is I like that it's once per long rest because it makes it feel interesting. If it was like somehow more usable or reusable, I think it actually would be problematic. Maybe there's something that you could do here to give yourself access to a second unstoppable or something like that. But yeah, I think fundamentally it's a really good ability and it's really nice what it does. Oh, I hate the Ranger's focus, so there's that. But I've hated ever since the Ranger became this like Hunter's Mark WoW clone thing. I hate it. I didn't like it in 4th edition. 5th, Pathfinder 2 does it. I hate this. I don't even know what this means. I don't even know what this means in the fiction. I just don't like it. So I don't like that ability. I like cloaked. Rogues need something. I guess sneak attack is still fine. I mean, this is where it gets into that weird space with the assassin and like, what is the difference between a rogue and a melee? What is the difference between like a melee rogue and an assassin? I love Prayer Dice. It's probably one of my favorite features in the entire game. Spend 3 hope to clear a hit point on an ally within close range. It's probably a little weak and it could probably be better. If this is supposed to be lay in hands, like if this guy's supposed to be a paladin, I mean, that's fine. I don't know how easy it should be to heal hit points, but it's crazy to me that like the Druid subclass is way better at it. But in my mind, the Seraph is the premier thing. Sorcerer, the premier hero of the game. Sorcerer, this is volatile magic's okay as a hope die. Spend 3 hope to reroll any number of your damage dice on attack that deals magic damage. It's fine, but I don't know. It's certainly setting the theme of what we've been talking about Sorcerer. I think we could just up this up a little bit. And then again, they get this like arcane sense and minor illusion. This to me is not what a sorcerer should be doing. A wizard maybe, or an illusionist class maybe, but not a sorcerer. So it's like they've kind of made the sorcerer kind of an illusionist, I guess, with the midnight feature, but it's not what I want. Channel raw power, on the other hand, is really cool. So see, this is what I'm saying. Like the sorcerer is trying to do too many things at once. Channel raw power, I do like. I would maybe even make it stronger. I love the warrior. I love that they get the attack of opportunity. I love their no mercy ability. And the wizard, again, I don't like not this time. I get what it's supposed to be, some kind of counter spell, people said, but it's an any attack roll. It's not just a spell casting thing. And then Strange Patterns is fine, but it's just a weird feature for the wizard to have. It's fun, but it's weird. And there's a part of me that like wishes it can never be for other characters. Obviously, it would be too good then, but there's a part of me that wishes it was for other characters. Or maybe if other characters crit on that number. So like if your number's 5, if you roll a 5, you get a hope. But if somebody crits on a 5, then you get a hope. I know it's a little bit more complicated, but it's just a weird number. It's a weird feature. It's one that like stands out to me. So yeah, overall, and I've been really impressed with the Void classes. I mean, I don't. Obviously, they're under development, so I can't really make any final pronouncements of them. Again, I think the game is awesome. I wouldn't be talking about it this much if I didn't. But it is. These are just changes based off of my, my vibe and my feelings. There's a huge difference between combat rogue and an assassination rogue. That's a WoWism for those. I did play a rogue in WoW for a long time. And then nobody goes subtlety. Bad horse. Flipping all cards. Okay. Flipping all cards over in B shape is a cool idea for another reason. All cards flipped creates an empty design space. Now suddenly other domains could potentially house beast abilities. Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's actually something that I thought about as well. Or classes that have you like transform or something like that. Dr. Metropolis says, I don't like any ranger that's not an Aragorn LARP. No, I don't even think ranger was his race. Basically, right? Like all the Dunedain were rangers. Rangers of the North was their race. That's true. Subtlety Rogue went PvP. That's true. Yeah. Dr. Metropolis says, yeah, Beastmaster is the WoW Ranger more than current D&D is. Derek is right that the class is a mess now. It's all over the place. It is all over the place. It's trying to do a lot of things here. So, Dritz for life. Dritz the least Ranger of all times Ranger. People always point to me as Dritz. They're like, well, no, Dritz is the quintessential Ranger. He dual wields, and he has an animal companion. And I always point out, I go, he learned dual wielding as a fighter in the Underdark because he was a drow with high dexterity, and that's what drow did. And then also, his animal companion isn't even an animal companion. It's a magical item that anybody could have, which he also got long before he became a ranger. So in that respect, Dritz is like the worst example of a ranger anytime. So, any case, the Sorcerer Hope ability feels very good in practice. I bet it does feel good, right? When you do the big, powerful spell and you roll shitty on your damage rolls, and you roll like, you're like, oh, here it comes, boys, 4d10, and you roll like a 1, 2, 6, 3, and you're like, and you're like, all right, spend 3 hope, re-roll the 1, 2, and the 3, and you're like, I have a greater than 50% chance to roll equal or better than a 6. I'm gonna re-roll the 6 too. Fuck it. I remember my slash corpse. I remember my source slash corpse macro on your bar. I also remember my easily reached slash loc command on my macro key. So when I was about to die, I could hit slash loc, so I could at least try to triangulate and coordinate through Pythagorean theorem where in the zone my body had died. Especially since every zone seemed to use a completely different set of coordinate systems, and so you could never really sure, So you had to get that slash loc. Anybody see my corpse? Anybody see my corpse? God, that game was brutal. Your players hate the gold system and think it's a huge miss for interesting narrative beats. Interesting. Just a thought popped up. What if the unnamed class could be a witch hedge mage-like class that could share a debuff-focused domain with a wizard and splendor with the seraph? Yeah, maybe. I mean, we do know we have the witch from play testing, and I don't want to step on that too much. Actually, though, I think a lot of people said that they were kind of surprised with the witch, because they were like, the witch didn't feel very dread-like. If you remember when we were doing the void reviews, when we were doing the void reviews, a lot of people were like, "Oh man, the witch feels almost more like a nice witch." Whether they're like, an apothecary witch who like makes little potions and little unguents for their companions. The moon witch, which likes to use illusions and transform themselves. And everyone was like, "Oh, that's cool, that's quaint, that's cute, that's fine." And then they're like, "How is this thing dreadful? It doesn't feel particularly like it doesn't. It's weird. It's like." By giving it the dread domain, they seem to be leaning into like the evil witch, from horror movies and, hocus pocus type thing. But then the actual class abilities and subclass abilities feel much more like a sort of modern, more respectful to Wicca, and being more respectful that, witches aren't necessarily bad people and they're just people too. But then giving them the dread domain kind of gives them this sort of dark vibe. So I don't know. It's kind of weird to go. I don't know where the witch is going to end up. But yeah. All right. Well, we went 3.5 hours. We gave away a set of dice. Congrats to Philip Legrand. More Daggerheart coming at some point. Like I said, I've got my studio that we're in the process of setting up, which is going to be great. We're going to play some Daggerheart. I've got more sets to give away, more dice to give away, so we're definitely going to be talking about this. I'm sure we're going to see some more stuff coming out from them in the coming next couple weeks here, now that they're back from Gen Con, rather than, for new updates to the Void domain. I mean, eventually, I'm sure already around Halloween, I think they said we might get a release. I don't know. We'll see. Is the Dread more like Halloween aesthetic than actual Dark? I don't know. I mean, the spells are things like Shared Trauma, Terrify, Chains of Affliction, Siphon Essence, Summon Horror, Wall of Hunger, Dark Army, Eldritch Flesh, Damnation, Savor the Anguish, Avatar of Terror, Invoke Torment. I mean, it all sounds kind of evil to me. Voice of Dread. I mean, it seems kind of, So. I mean, it's totally fine to skip on playtest stuff because it is going to change, and I wouldn't get too bent out of shape about what they put in it and what they don't put out, unless you really want to like help them and develop stuff, So yeah, I don't know what's going on this week. We still got other stuff to talk about. We got Pathfinder 2, Starfinder 2, Warhammer Old World. Somebody bought me something. What did they buy me? I gotta even look. I don't even know anymore. I mean, they also tipped a significant amount of money. I'd have to check. What game? Oh, Legends of the Mist, which came out as well. Legends of the Mist, Warhammer Old World GM Guide, Dungeon World 2, Battlecry, Starfinder 2. We just got a lot of talk stuff here. A lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of stuff. And then I got to get it done because I'm going to be here next week. And then I'm flying to Oregon and driving from Oregon to Seattle with Mr. Stephen Glicker, and we're going to be back up at PAX. So, oh, right. We also have Legends of the Five Ring released their Unicorn book. We got to look at that and see if it's better than the Writ of the Wild, the Dragon book, which was terrible. And of course, all the other stuff I want to do with the channel and a million other things. Derek, since you've played MTG and TTRPG, why is there this need to dumb down rules for TTRPGs to avoid complexity while no such thing really exists for Magic? Well, Magic is very complex, but those two games live in a very different world. Magic the Gathering is explicitly a competitive game. And so technically TTRPGs are not. Magic the Gathering is not a game, in theory, where you are allowed to make up the rules at your leisure, whereas those games are TTRPGs are. So I mean, they operate under very different sets of circumstances. But that being said, Magic the Gathering design would completely disagree with you. They try very hard to limit themselves in the overall complexity of the kind of cards that they create, although they have started to violate that. But if you look up something in Magic the Gathering called New World Order, which is basically that it's an idea that common cards affect the board less than uncommons, which affect the board less than rare. And they introduced this in order to fight complexity creep. Now, big part of the actual criticism against Magic in the last couple of years is they have really gone back on that. And nowadays, commons even can be very complex cards with many line of text. If you haven't played Magic in 10 years and you looked at a Magic card today, you would be shocked at how much text is on there. And some people find it is to the detriment of the game. And a big part of the reason that some people think it is there is because the game is primarily and principally now designed to be played digitally. And it can be no mistake that the reason why Magic makes a ton of money is because of Arena. And so when you make a digital game, you offload a lot of that complexity. A lot of the complexity on a card may not be how you use it. It might trigger something when it enters play. It gives all your creatures +1/+3 and trample. And if they are blocked by more than 2 creatures, something happens. You don't have to track any of that on a digital game. It just does it for you automatically. So some of the complexity in the card design has come, I think, from the online focus. So, nice, Dan. You have mostly min-maxers at your table. My MTG players are playing tabletop role-playing for role-playing, for RP. Yeah, okay. Well, that's interesting. I mean, again, I think Daggerheart has enough mechanical choices to keep a lot of people who like crunch satisfied, but it is absolutely not a game for the sort of the min-maxer, right? So, yeah. Anyways. All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to go. I'm going to tan out. We'll be back in a day or two for more streaming, of course. Trying to get some stuff in here and talk more about Daggerheart, Draw Steel, Pathfinder, Starfinder, all those cool games, and then somehow figure out ways to get Shadow Deep in there and do more streams about everything. So thanks for hanging out. Again, thank you to the folks on Thursday who supported this bonus stream. So really appreciate that. Cal, thank you for one final tip. Cal gets the last word.
Tip $3. When you see something that clashes tonally in Daggerheart, keep in mind this game has anime nerds that worked on it. The clash is that of the old LOTR culture versus the new anime fantasy culture.
I could see that.
This was for the good witch.
Yeah, I can see that. You're absolutely right. We're sort of entering a new world where fantasy used to mean Tolkien and Earthsea and all this other stuff. And now fantasy for a lot of people means, anime or video games, right? Or Final Fantasy. So it is a big difference. Well, thank you to Cal for that tip and many others. Thank you to Danjamin for the super chat, Edward for the tips. Thank you to Self-Confessed Cynic for the super chats, to Raul Tib for the Raul for the super chat, to Lord Kyler who kicked us off with the super chat. It was nice that you guys even put some money down today, especially since we didn't really have real tip goals and we were just kind of hanging out and shooting the shit. But thank you everybody, and I'll see you next time. You never know when it could be, so make sure to follow us and be notified, or join the Patreon, because then you can get the alerts through our Discord when we are posting a new video and we're about to go live. Everybody, and you can even vote on what that topic will be. So check us out, patreon.com/Knights-of-Last-Call. We'd love to see you there to talk about Daggerheart, Pathfinder 2, or all the things. Bye. Catch you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace.